Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
My wife cheated with her boss for 20 years and all 3 of our kids are his. I destroyed them both at my daughter's graduation with a PowerPoint presentation. When a routine blood test revealed my son couldn't possibly be mine, I uncovered a betrayal so deep it shattered everything I believed about my family. As an economics professor, I spent 6 months meticulously gathering evidence DNA tests, financial records, and damning audio recordings. What followed was the most calculated public revenge ever delivered at a graduation ceremony, complete with federal agents waiting in the wings. This is the story of how I transformed from a blindly trusting husband into what the internet would later call the economist of revenge. Before we begin, let me know where you're tuning in from down in the comments, and if you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next tale. The fluorescent lights in the University of Utah Hospital emergency room flickered like dying fireflies, casting alternating shadows across Blake Morrison's weathered face. He sat rigid in the plastic chair, his economist's mind automatically calculating probabilities, even as his heart hammered against his ribs. Through the glass partition, he could see his middle son thrashing on the gurney, blood seeping through hastily applied bandages. Professor Morrison? A nurse appeared at his elbow, her name tag read Brenda, and something about her familiar features nagged at him. Ryan needs blood immediately. As his father, you're our best match option. Of course. Blake rolled up his sleeve without hesitation, the motion automatic, paternal. 21 years of fatherhood had trained him for moments like these, or so he thought. The blood draw was routine until Brenda returned with the compatibility results, her brow furrowed. She glanced at the chart, then at Blake, then back at the chart. That's odd, she muttered, catching herself too late. What's odd? Blake's analytical instincts sharpened despite his exhaustion. Oh, nothing serious. Just... Brenda bit her lip, a gesture that seemed deliberately theatrical. Your blood type is a positive, and Ryan's showing as a B positive. It's just unusual, that's all. We'll find another donor. She hurried away before Blake could respond, leaving him alone with a revelation that shouldn't have mattered, but suddenly consumed every neuron in his brain. His undergraduate biology knowledge, dusty but intact, offered a simple truth. A-positive fathers don't have AB-positive children. The waiting room walls seemed to close in as memories flooded back 20 years compressed into seconds. The campus bar where he'd first seen Sabrina, her auburn hair catching the amber light as she served overpriced cocktails to college students. He'd been a young PhD candidate, all theories and equations, until she smiled at him over a glass of whiskey he couldn't afford. Blake? Sabrina's voice shattered his reverie. She stood in the doorway, still wearing her work clothes from the Crimson Sage, a black cocktail dress that hugged curves that had softened with age but remained undeniably attractive. How is he? Stable? They're getting blood from the bank. Blake studied her face, searching for tells he'd never thought to look for before. Your shift ended early. Marcus gave me the night off when he heard... She collapsed into the chair beside him, her perfume something expensive he didn't recognize mingling with the hospital's antiseptic smell. Thank God you were home when the ranger called. Marcus. Her boss's name fell from her lips with practiced ease, but Blake caught something else, a familiarity that transcended employer and employee. How many times had she mentioned Marcus lately? How many nights had she come home with stories about the successful restaurateur who owned not just the Crimson Sage but half the upscale establishments in Salt Lake City? The blood type was interesting, Blake said carefully, watching her reflection in the dark window. Apparently Ryan's AB positive. Sabrina's hand stilled halfway to her hair. For a fraction of a second, the kind of moment his regression models would flag as statistically significant, her mask slipped. Then she laughed, the sound brittle as winter ice on Utah Lake. Oh, that's from my father's side. Recessive genes and all that. You know I never paid attention in biology. She leaned against him, seeking comfort or providing cover, he couldn't tell which anymore. The important thing is Ryan's going to be fine. Blake nodded, filing away her explanation alongside 20 years of similar dismissals. How convenient that Sabrina's family genetics could explain away impossibilities. How many other explanations had he accepted without question? A young doctor emerged to update them on Ryan's condition: broken ribs, lacerated spleen, but nothing life-threatening. The rock climbing accident at Little Cottonwood Canyon could have been fatal. Instead, it had merely torn open wounds Blake hadn't known existed. As Sabrina spoke with the doctor, Blake observed her with the detached analysis he usually reserved for economic data sets. When had she started styling her hair differently? The designer handbag, surely too expensive for a part-time bartender's salary, when had that appeared? The way she checked her phone every few minutes, smiling at messages she didn't share, how long had that been happening? "Dad?" Ellen's voice interrupted his calculations. His youngest burst through the emergency room doors, still wearing her Highland High School volleyball uniform. At 18, she had inherited his analytical mind and her mother's beauty, a combination that usually filled him with pride but now twisted his stomach. "Is Ryan okay? I came as soon as practice ended." "He'll be fine, sweetheart." Blake pulled her into a hug, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. Ellen had always been his shadow, the child who sought his advice on everything from calculus to college applications. The child who just last week had mentioned something about Marcus helping pay for her driving lessons, a detail Blake had dismissed as teenage exaggeration. "Mom texted that Marcus offered to cover Ryan's deductible," Ellen said, pulling back to study his face. "Isn't that generous? I didn't even know he knew Ryan that well." The hospital's fluorescent lights flickered again, and in that stroboscopic moment, Blake saw his life for what it truly was. A carefully constructed facade as fragile as the economic models that assumed perfect information. He'd built his career on understanding hidden variables and market failures, yet he'd failed to see the most critical data set of all his own family. "Very generous," Blake agreed, his voice steady despite the earthquake reshaping his internal landscape. "We should thank him properly." Sabrina returned from her discussion with the doctor, slipping her phone into her purse with practiced nonchalance. "They're moving Ryan to a room. We can see him in an hour." She touched Blake's arm, the gesture intimate yet somehow performative. "Why don't you go home and rest? You have that early faculty meeting tomorrow." 20 years ago, he would have protested, insisting on staying. Tonight, Blake simply nodded. He needed time to think, to analyze, to transform raw data into actionable intelligence. The economist in him was already calculating probabilities and constructing decision trees, but the husband, the father, that part of him was still reeling from a simple blood test that had shattered everything he thought he knew. As he walked toward the parking garage, the Wasatch Mountains loomed in the darkness, their peaks invisible but undeniably present. Like the truth about his marriage, Blake thought, hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to finally look up and see. Blake's home office hadn't seen him at 3 a.m. since his last book deadline, but sleep was a luxury his racing mind couldn't afford. The mahogany desk, a 10th anniversary gift from Sabrina, was now covered with bank statements, credit card bills, and the detritus of 20 years of shared finances. Each document told a story, and Blake, the economist who'd built his reputation on finding patterns in chaos, was finally reading between the lines. The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he barely noticed. His laptop screen glowed with spreadsheets, each cell a breadcrumb in a trail he'd been too blind to follow, or too trusting. The distinction hardly mattered now. Cash withdrawals had increased 340% over the past 18 months, always on nights when Sabrina worked late inventory at the Crimson Sage, always just below the $500 threshold that triggered fraud alerts. Blake's fingers flew across the keyboard, constructing a timeline that transformed suspicion into evidence. The separate credit card Sabrina had opened, for emergencies, told its own story. The montage Deer Valley charges from last February when she'd supposedly been at a bartending conference in Vegas. The Patterson Steakhouse receipts on her nights off, always for two, always paid in full. The jewelry store purchase from 3 months ago that coincided with her wearing a really good fake diamond tennis bracelet. Blake paused at that entry, remembering how she'd laughed off his compliment. "You know we can't afford the real thing on a professor's salary," she'd said, kissing his cheek. The bracelet had caught the light as she moved, throwing tiny rainbows across their kitchen wall. He'd found it charming then. Now it felt like shrapnel. His phone buzzed. A text from Jacob, their eldest, working late at his tech startup in Leahy. "How's Ryan? Sorry I couldn't make it to the hospital. Big product launch tomorrow." Blake stared at the message, wondering if Jacob's dark eyes and sharp features bore any resemblance to his own, or if that too was just another comfortable lie he'd told himself. When had he stopped looking for himself in his children's faces? The financial forensics continued until dawn painted the mountains purple. By then, Blake had constructed what he would later present to his advanced microeconomics class as a case study in information asymmetry. The numbers didn't just suggest infidelity, they screamed it. But it was the parking garage security footage that transformed hypothesis into theory. Blake had called in a favor from a former student who worked in campus security. "Just need to check if my car was broken into last month," he'd lied smoothly. The footage was grainy but sufficient. Sabrina's Honda Civic entering the Crimson Sage's parking structure at 9:47 p.m., leaving at 2:33 a.m. The bar closed at midnight. More damning was the second set of headlights that followed her out a black Mercedes S-Class that Blake recognized from the faculty lot. He'd seen it before, admired it even, wondered what kind of success in the restaurant business afforded such luxury. Marcus Thorne's car. The morning sun was streaming through his office window when Blake finally allowed himself to feel the full weight of his discoveries. He'd approached this like an economist, but he was still a man who'd just learned his entire life was built on counterfeit currency. "Blake, you're up early." Sabrina stood in the doorway, already dressed for her morning yoga class. Her smile faltered when she saw the papers covering his desk. "What's all this?" "Research," he said truthfully, "for a new paper on household financial patterns." She relaxed visibly, moving behind him to massage his shoulders. Her hands were familiar, practiced, but Blake now wondered whose else shoulders they'd touched. "You work too hard. Why don't you come back to bed?" "Can't." "Faculty meeting?" He closed his laptop, shuffling papers to hide the most damning evidence. "By the way, I noticed some unusual charges on the credit cards. The one from Montage last winter?" Her hands stilled for just a moment. "Oh, that. Brenda and I were scouting venues for your surprise 50th birthday party. I wanted it to be special." She laughed, the sound like wind chimes in a storm. "Guess it's not a surprise anymore." Blake nodded, adding another lie to his mental ledger. Brenda had been pulling double shifts at the hospital that entire week he'd checked. The economics of deception, he thought, required constant investment to maintain returns. "I should go," Sabrina said, grabbing her yoga mat. "Ellen needs a ride to school after. Oh, and Marcus wanted me to ask he's got tickets to the Jazz game next week. Courtside. Thought you and the boys might enjoy them." Generous of him. Blake kept his voice neutral, though acid burned his throat. "He certainly seems invested in our family's happiness. He's just a good boss." She kissed his forehead, a benediction that felt like betrayal. "Try to get some sleep. You look exhausted." After she left, Blake sat in the silence of his office, surrounded by evidence of a life built on false premises. The rational part of his mind was already calculating optimal strategies, game theory scenarios where he maximized his outcome while minimizing damage to the children. But the human part, the part that had fallen in love with a beautiful bartender 20 years ago, that part was drowning in Utah Lake, pulled down by the weight of willful blindness. He picked up a framed photo from his desk. Their family at Arches National Park last summer. 5 smiling faces against red rock formations, the perfect American family. Blake studied each face now with forensic intensity. Jacob's jawline, Ryan's nose, Ellen's eyes searching for himself in features that might have come from anywhere, anyone. The morning sun climbed higher, casting sharp shadows across his desk. Blake reached for his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found the name he needed. Patricia Chen, the best divorce attorney in Utah. He'd referred colleagues to her over the years, never imagining he'd need her services himself. But first, he had more data to collect. The economist in him demanded a complete data set before making any irreversible decisions. And Blake Morrison, who'd built his career on rational analysis and careful planning, was about to become an expert in a new field of study, the economics of revenge. Outside his window, a red-tailed hawk circled the thermals above the valley, patient, calculating, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The University of Utah Medical Center's genetic counseling office smelled of lavender and lies. Blake sat across from Dr. Patricia Yoon, watching her explain why comprehensive genetic testing would benefit Ryan's long-term care. Sabrina fidgeted beside him, her fingers drumming against her designer purse, the one that cost more than Blake's monthly car payment. Given the severity of the accident and Ryan's medical history, Dr. Yoon continued, adjusting her wire-rimmed glasses, a full panel would help us identify any underlying conditions that might affect his recovery. How comprehensive. Sabrina's voice pitched higher than usual. I mean, what exactly would you be testing for? Blake noticed her careful avoidance of his eyes. In 20 years of marriage, he'd cataloged her tells like economic indicators. The drumming fingers meant anxiety. The slight lean away from him signaled desire for escape. The way she touched her wedding ring, turning it round and round, that was new. Standard genetic markers, hereditary conditions, blood disorders. Dr. Yoon smiled reassuringly. Nothing invasive. We'd need samples from both parents to establish baseline genetics. It's quite routine. It's also expensive. Sabrina turned to Blake, her green eyes pleading. Our insurance won't cover all of it, and Ryan's recovering well. Do we really need, I'll pay out of pocket? Blake kept his voice steady, professional. Our son's health is worth any cost. Sabrina's mask slipped for just a moment, a flash of panic quickly smothered. But the tests could take weeks. And what if they find something? What if, then we'll deal with it? He placed his hand over hers, feeling her pulse race beneath his fingers. Together, like we always have. The word together tasted like ash in his mouth. Dr. Yoon scheduled the tests for the following week, but Blake had no intention of waiting. That evening, while Sabrina attended her shift at the Crimson Sage, he collected what he needed: a strand of hair from Ryan's brush, his own cheek swab, FedEx overnight to a private lab in Denver that promised discretion for a premium price. The house felt different now, as if the walls themselves knew they'd been sheltering secrets. Blake moved through the rooms like an archaeologist, seeing evidence everywhere. The family portraits lining the hallway, had he ever really looked at them? Jacob's graduation photo showed a young man with sharp Mediterranean features. Nothing like Blake's soft Anglo-Saxon ancestry, Ryan's athletic build and olive complexion, Ellen's delicate bone structure that everyone said came from Sabrina's side. Everyone said. How convenient that genetics could be blamed on invisible ancestors, recessive genes, family members nobody had met. His phone rang. Brenda's name appeared on the screen, the same nurse from the hospital, Sabrina's supposed best friend from college. Professor Morrison? I'm sorry to call so late. Her voice was thick, slurred slightly. I'm at Gracie's Tavern on State Street. I need to talk to you. About Sabrina. About everything. Blake found her in a corner booth, nursing what was clearly not her first whiskey of the night. Brenda looked older than her 46 years, worn down by double shifts and whatever knowledge she'd been carrying. I shouldn't be here, she said as he slid into the booth across from her, but I can't watch this anymore. Not after seeing you at the hospital looking at those blood-type results like your world was ending. What do you know, Brenda? She laughed bitterly. What don't I know? I've been Sabrina's friend for 25 years. I've kept her secrets, covered for her, lied for her. She drained her glass, signaling the bartender for another. But this has gone too far. Those children. Your children. Blake's economist mind kicked in, calculating the value of information against the reliability of an intoxicated source. But his heart, that traitor organ, just wanted the truth, no matter how it came. Marcus, Brenda continued, not waiting for his question. It's always been Marcus. Even before you, there was Marcus. They dated in college, broke up when he went to culinary school in France. She met you during their off period. She laughed again, the sound sharp as broken glass. You were supposed to be the rebound, Professor, the safe choice, the stable one with the good job and the kind heart. Each word was a precisely placed cut, but Blake remained still, gathering data. When Marcus came back from France, opened his first restaurant, God, you should have seen her. Lit up like Christmas morning. But he was engaged to Camille by then. Rich family, investment connections. He needed their money to build his empire. Brenda's eyes focused on something beyond Blake's shoulder. So Sabrina married you and Marcus married Camille. And everyone pretended that was the end of it. But it wasn't. No. She met his eyes then, and Blake saw pity there that burned worse than betrayal. Every few years, they'd start up again. When you were consumed with tenure review. When you were writing your first book. When you spent that semester as a visiting professor at Berkeley. She ticked off the timeline on her fingers. And after each time, 9 months later, Blake's phone buzzed. An email from the Denver lab. Results ready for secure download. His hands didn't shake as he logged into the portal. The documents loaded with cruel efficiency, reducing 21 years of fatherhood to a simple percentage. Probability of paternity, 0%. I'm sorry, Brenda whispered, watching his face. I'm so fucking sorry, but you needed to know. Marcus brags about it when he's drunk, calls you the most expensive babysitter in Utah, says you're raising his kids better than he ever could. Blake closed his eyes, but the numbers remained burned into his retinas. 0%. Not unlikely. Not improbable. 0. There's more, Brenda said quietly. Marcus isn't just a restaurant owner. The businesses are fronts, or at least partially. Money laundering, some people say. Connections to some very dangerous people. Sabrina knows but doesn't care. The lifestyle, the gifts, the excitement, it's what she always wanted. Blake stood abruptly, leaving cash on the table for Brenda's drinks. Thank you for telling me. What are you going to do? He looked at her then, and something in his expression made her shrink back. What any rational economist would do. I'm going to maximize my return on investment. The drive home took him past the Crimson Sage. The valet lot was full of luxury cars, Salt Lake City's elite enjoying overpriced cocktails and the illusion of sophistication. Somewhere inside, Sabrina was serving drinks, laughing at customers' jokes, playing the role of the charming bartender while her husband sat in his car, holding proof that his entire life was a forgery. Blake's phone rang. Ellen's name appeared on the screen. Dad, where are you? I need help with my AP Econ homework. It's about market failures and hidden information. The irony was so perfect it almost made him laugh. I'll be home soon, sweetheart. And I know exactly how to explain hidden information. As he drove toward home, toward his daughter who wasn't his daughter, Blake began to plan. The economist in him understood that the best revenge wasn't emotional, it was strategic. It wasn't about destroying Sabrina and Marcus, though that would be a byproduct. It was about reclaiming agency in a game where he'd been played for a fool for 2 decades. The Wasatch Mountains stood sentinel against the night sky, ancient and unforgiving. Blake had hiked those peaks countless times, teaching his children not his children about persistence, about reaching the summit no matter how difficult the climb. Now he had a different summit to reach. And unlike the mountains, this one required not strength but patience, not courage but calculation, not love but the cold, precise application of economic theory to the business of revenge. In his pocket, 3 paternity tests waited to be ordered. Jacob, Ellen, and the final confirmation of what Blake already knew, that he had been paying the highest price possible for a family that was never his. Blake's office at the University of Utah had witnessed 20 years of academic achievements, but none more important than the meeting taking place this gray Thursday afternoon. Outside, November snow dusted the campus, but inside, the temperature was decidedly cold as Patricia Chen spread documents across his desk with surgical precision. Full financial disclosure shows significant marital asset dissipation, Patricia said, her voice carrying the confident cadence of Utah's most feared divorce attorney. The hidden credit cards, the cash withdrawals, the gifts purchased with community funds, it's textbook financial infidelity. Blake nodded, his economist's mind appreciating her methodical approach. 3 days had passed since the first DNA test. 3 days of wearing his professor mask while his world crumbled like sandstone in water. The other test, Jacob and Ellen had confirmed what he already knew. 24 years of fatherhood reduced to a genetic impossibility. But the DNA evidence, Patricia continued, tapping the folder that contained his family's unraveling. This changes everything. Utah's courts take a dim view of paternity fraud, combined with the evidence of ongoing adultery. I want to be strategic about this, Blake interrupted, surprising himself with the steadiness of his voice. The children, he caught himself. Jacob, Ryan, and Ellen. They're victims too. I need to minimize their trauma while maximizing my position. Patricia smiled, the expression sharp as winter wind through Red Rock Canyon. I appreciate a client who thinks tactically. Here's what I recommend. Continue your normal routine. Document everything. Transfer your research funds and book royalties to accounts she can't access, all legal under Utah's asset protection statutes. Most importantly, gather evidence of Marcus Thorne's business dealings. The money laundering Brenda mentioned? Exactly. If we can establish that Sabrina knowingly benefited from illegal activities, it strengthens our position exponentially. She pulled out another document. I've also taken the liberty of researching Mr. Thorne. His restaurant empire is leveraged heavily. One financial scandal, one investigation, and his house of cards collapses. Blake studied the financial reports, seeing patterns his trained eye recognized instantly. Revenues that didn't match reported customer traffic. Supply costs that seemed inflated. Cash businesses perfect for washing dirty money clean. There's something else, Blake said, retrieving a flash drive from his locked drawer. Audio recordings, Utah's one-party consent state, correct? Patricia's smile widened. Indeed it is, Professor. Over the next 2 weeks, Blake became a method actor worthy of an Oscar. He kissed Sabrina goodbye each morning, asked about her day each evening, even made love to her twice his body performing while his mind calculated angles of attack. He attended Ryan's follow-up appointments, helped Ellen with her college applications, discussed startup strategies with Jacob, the perfect father, the devoted husband, the fool they all believed him to be. But in the margins of his life, Blake was building something else. He hired a private investigator, a former IRS agent who specialized in financial crimes. The man's reports arrived encrypted, detailing Sabrina's meetings with Marcus, their hotel encounters, their increasingly brazen public displays. Photos showed them at Park City restaurants, shopping in boutiques, attending concerts, a parallel life funded by Blake's salary and Marcus's dirty money. "You're working late again," Sabrina observed one evening, finding him in his study. She wore a silk robe he didn't recognize, another gift from her generous employer, no doubt. The new book? Something like that. He minimized the window showing Marcus's shell company structures. How was work? Busy. Marcus is expanding again. He's buying that old steakhouse on Main Street. She perched on his desk, her legs bare and deliberately displayed. He asked if you'd like to consult on the financial projections. Paid, of course. The audacity of it, asking Blake to help launder money through a business funded by his wife's affair, was almost admirable. I'll think about it. Sabrina leaned forward, her perfume aggressive in the small space. You've been distant lately. Is everything okay? Just tired. End of semester stress. He met her eyes, wondering if she could see the knowledge burning there. Why don't we take a vacation after finals? Just the two of us. Her face went through a series of micro-expressions: surprise, calculation, panic, resolution. That sounds wonderful. But you know I can't leave during the holidays. It's our busiest season at the bar. Of course. The holidays when Marcus's wife traveled to see family, when the restaurant owner would have more free time. Blake filed this away with all the other data points that would soon coalesce into Sabrina's destruction. Ellen asked me something strange yesterday, Blake said casually, watching her reflection in his computer screen. She wanted to know why Uncle Marcus had her social security number. Something about a college fund he's setting up? Sabrina's hand knocked over his coffee mug, sending cold liquid across his research papers. Oh God, I'm so sorry. She grabbed tissues, dabbing frantically at the mess. Marcus mentioned maybe helping with the kids' education. You know how generous he is, but I told him we couldn't accept. Did you? Blake helped clean up, using the motion to hide his expression, because Ellen seemed to think it was already decided. I'll talk to her. Clear up the confusion. Sabrina's smile was brittle as December ice. You know how teenagers misunderstand things. Yes, Blake thought, and how adults mislead. That night, unable to sleep beside the woman who'd made him a stranger in his own life, Blake stood at his bedroom window. The valley spread below, lights twinkling like earthbound stars. Somewhere out there, Marcus Thorne slept beside his legitimate wife, secure in the knowledge that another man was raising his children. Blake's phone vibrated. A text from Jacob. "Dad, can we talk? Having some issues at work. Could use your advice." Even now, even knowing the truth, the word dad pierced him. 24 years of bedtime stories, homework help, driving lessons, heart-to-heart talks. 24 years of love that genetics said was misplaced, but his heart insisted was real. He texted back, "Of course, lunch tomorrow?" Patricia had warned him that the hardest part wouldn't be the legal proceedings or the financial untangling. It would be the moment when the children learned the truth, when Jacob, Ryan, and Ellen discovered that their entire family history was fiction. But that was still to come. For now, Blake had a role to play and evidence to gather. He had already identified the perfect moment for revelation: Ellen's high school graduation in May, a public event where Marcus and his wife would be present, where Sabrina's family would gather to celebrate, where the maximum number of people could witness the unmasking. It would take months of preparation, careful documentation, strategic positioning, but Blake had built his career on long-term planning and delayed gratification. He could wait. He could smile at breakfast and plan destruction over dinner. He could be the husband Sabrina thought she'd fooled while becoming the architect of her downfall. In the distance, a train whistle echoed across the valley, a lonesome sound that spoke of journeys and destinations. Blake Morrison had begun his own journey, one that would end not with reconciliation, but with the complete dismantling of the life Sabrina had built on the foundation of his ignorance. The economics of revenge, he was learning, required patience, planning, and the willingness to lose everything in order to gain the only thing that mattered anymore: the truth, served cold as a Utah winter, in front of everyone who had ever believed the lie. The economics department's faculty lounge buzzed with pre-holiday chatter, but Blake Morrison sat apart, stirring his coffee with mechanical precision. 3 weeks had passed since the DNA revelations, 3 weeks of wearing masks so perfectly fitted that even he sometimes forgot which face was real. Blake. Professor Harrison from finance dropped into the adjacent chair. "Heard through the grapevine you're interested in restaurant economics. My brother-in-law's in that game, says the margins are brutal unless you're creative with the books." Creative? Blake's interest sharpened, though his expression remained casually curious. "You know, ghost employees, inflated supply costs, cash transactions that never quite make it to the register." Harrison winked. "Not that anyone we know would do such things." Blake filed this away, another thread in the web he was weaving. That evening, he found Sabrina in their kitchen, preparing for another shift at the Crimson Sage. She wore a new dress burgundy silk that probably cost more than their monthly grocery budget. "Nice dress," he commented, pouring himself wine with steady hands. "This old thing." She spun, the fabric flowing like blood. "Marcus insists we dress upscale during the holiday rush. Image is everything in hospitality." "Speaking of Marcus," Blake said, settling at the breakfast bar, "I've been thinking about his offer to consult on the new restaurant. Maybe I should take him up on it." Sabrina's hand paused halfway to her earring. "Really? I thought you were too busy with your research." "The semester's winding down. Besides, I'm curious about the restaurant business. All those cash transactions, supplier relationships, employee management. It's a fascinating economic ecosystem. I'll mention it to him." Her smile was forced, calculating. "Though he's been pretty stressed lately, some issue with his investors." Blake made a sympathetic noise while mentally noting this new information. Stressed investors meant pressure. Pressure meant mistakes. Mistakes meant opportunities. After Sabrina left kissing his cheek with lips that had touched another man's mouth, Blake retreated to his study. The private investigator's latest report waited in his encrypted folder. Photos of Sabrina entering the Waldorf Astoria in Park City at 2 p.m. last Tuesday. Marcus's Mercedes in the valet lane. She'd told Blake she was Christmas shopping with her sister in Ogden, but it was the financial data that truly fascinated him. Blake had used his academic access to various databases, piecing together Marcus Thorne's empire like a complex economic model. 7 restaurants, 3 bars, 2 catering companies, all structured through a maze of LLCs that would make a tax attorney weep with either joy or frustration. The patterns were subtle but unmistakable. Revenue spikes that coincided with known drug busts in the city times when dirty money needed washing. Employee rosters padded with names that matched no social security records. Supply invoices from companies that existed only on paper. Blake's phone buzzed. A text from his investigator. Jackpot. Found a disgruntled former employee. Oliver Reeves fired 6 months ago. Says he has recordings. Within an hour, Blake sat across from Oliver in a diner on the outskirts of town. The younger man looked nervous, glancing at the door every few minutes. "I shouldn't be doing this," Oliver said, sliding a thumb drive across the table. "Marcus has connections, but what he did to me, accusing me of stealing when I questioned the books. What's on here?" Blake pocketed the drive with practiced casualness. 3 months of recorded conversations. Marcus liked to brag when he was high cocaine's his weakness. There's one from last month where he's talking about your wife. Oliver's eyes flickered with sympathy. "I'm sorry, man. He's not subtle about their arrangement." Blake's expression remained neutral, though inside another piece clicked into place. "Anything about the money?" "Everything about the money. Names, amounts, which cops are paid off, which health inspectors look the other way. He thought I was too stupid to understand, but I recorded everything after he started setting me up." Blake slid an envelope across the table cache, untraceable. This never happened. What never happened? Oliver pocketed the money and disappeared into the night. Back home, Blake loaded the files onto an air-gapped laptop. Marcus's voice filled his headphones, arrogant, careless, damning. But it was track 47 that stopped Blake's breath. "You should see him," Marcus laughed, clearly intoxicated. "The professor, playing daddy to my kids. Sabrina says he's planning college funds, worried about their futures. If only he knew he's been paying for my bloodline all these years. Best investment I ever made, letting another man raise my children while I fuck their mother." Blake removed the headphones slowly, his hands steady despite the rage coursing through his veins. He'd built his career on rational analysis, on removing emotion from decision-making. That skill served him now as he began composing an anonymous email to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. But not yet. The timing had to be perfect. His phone rang Ellen, asking for a ride home from volleyball practice. Blake saved his work, encrypted the files, and drove to the school. His daughter, not his daughter, climbed into the car, chattering about college applications and scholarship opportunities. "Dad, do you think I should apply to out-of-state schools? Mom says I should stay close to home, but sometimes I think..." She trailed off, staring out at the mountains. "What do you think?" Blake navigated the familiar streets, each turn a small betrayal of the life he'd built here. "I think I want to see what's beyond Utah. Is that wrong?" "No, sweetheart. Sometimes the best thing we can do is leave the familiar behind." He glanced at her profile, seeing Marcus's sharp features hidden beneath her mother's coloring. "Apply everywhere. I'll make sure we can afford it." "But Mom said Uncle Marcus was setting up." "Your mother's boss isn't your uncle, Ellen, and we don't need his money." Blake's voice carried more edge than intended. Ellen fell silent, and Blake cursed himself. The children couldn't know, not yet. They were victims, too, innocent of their parents' deceptions. His revenge wouldn't destroy them. That night, Blake lay beside Sabrina, listening to her breathe. She'd come home at 3 a.m., showering before sliding into bed. The scent of her shampoo couldn't mask the cologne that clung to her skin, Marcus's signature scent, the one Blake now recognized from their few social encounters. "I love you," she murmured, already half asleep. The words hung in the darkness like counterfeit bills, worthless and insulting. Blake didn't respond. Instead, he mentally reviewed his growing arsenal: financial evidence, recorded confessions, photographic proof of adultery, DNA results waiting like atomic weapons in his safe. The economics of revenge, he realized, operated on the same principles as any market: supply and demand, risk and reward, perfect information leading to perfect destruction. And Blake Morrison, patient architect of his own justice, would ensure that when the market corrected, everyone would pay the true price. January snow blanketed Salt Lake City, transforming the valley into a deceptive postcard of domestic tranquility. Blake stood at his office window, watching students navigate icy pathways below. The spring semester would begin soon, but his real education was happening far from any classroom. "Professor Morrison?" His teaching assistant knocked. "Someone's here to see you. Says it's about consulting work?" Blake's pulse quickened. "Send them in." The man who entered looked like 1,000 other mid-level businessmen, forgettable face, forgettable suit, forgettable everything except his eyes. Those belonged to someone who'd seen too much and forgotten nothing. "Mr. Morrison, I'm Detective Ray Castellanos, Financial Crimes Division." He didn't offer his hand. "We received some interesting information about certain restaurants in the city. Anonymous tip, but very detailed. Very academic in its analysis." Blake's expression remained professionally curious. "How can I help you, Detective?" "Word is you're the best forensic economist in the state. We need someone to review some financial records, strictly as a consultant. Unofficial for now." Castellano studied Blake's face. "The business owner in question, I believe you know him socially?" "If you mean Marcus Thorne, we've met at a few events. My wife works at one of his establishments." "That could be a conflict of interest." "Or an advantage," Blake countered. "I understand the legitimate side of his business model. Any anomalies would be more apparent to me than to an outsider." Castellanos smiled a sharp, knowing expression. "I like how you think, Professor. How soon can you start?" After the detective left with Blake's agreement to consult and a confidentiality agreement signed, Blake allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The pieces were moving into position, pawns advancing toward an endgame only he could see. His phone buzzed. Sabrina, texting about dinner plans. Marcus and Camille wanted to take them to the new steakhouse, a soft opening for special friends. Blake responded with enthusiasm he didn't feel. Perfect. Let them think he was still the oblivious professor, content to break bread with the man who'd stolen his life. That evening, Blake found Ellen in the living room, laptop open, crying quietly. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" He sat beside her, fighting the urge to pull her into his arms. Every gesture of affection now felt like a lie. It's stupid. She wiped her eyes. "Mom and I had a fight about college. She says I'm being ungrateful, that Uncle Marcus sorry, Mr. Thorne is offering to help pay, and I should be thankful." "What did you tell her?" "That I don't want his money. That something about him feels wrong." Ellen looked up at Blake, green eyes so like her mother's but holding an honesty Sabrina had lost decades ago. "Is that crazy?" "No." Blake chose his words carefully. "Trust your instincts. They're usually right. Mom said I'm too young to understand how the world works, that sometimes we have to accept help from people we don't particularly like." The irony was suffocating. Sabrina, teaching their daughter to accept tainted gifts while living a life built on Blake's legitimate earnings. "Ellen, listen to me." Blake turned to face her fully. "You never have to accept anything that makes you uncomfortable. Not money, not help, not attention. Your mother means well, but she's wrong about this." Ellen hugged him then, fierce and sudden. "Thanks, Dad. I knew you'd understand." The word dad was a knife between his ribs, but Blake held her anyway. The children were the only pure thing to come from his marriage's wreckage. DNA be damned. Later at the steakhouse, Blake watched the performance unfold. Marcus, playing the magnanimous host. Camille, his wife, elegant and cold, checking her phone constantly. Sabrina, laughing too loud at Marcus's jokes, her hand occasionally brushing his arm when she thought no one was looking. "Blake!" Marcus boomed, pouring wine with a heavy hand. "Sabrina tells me you're interested in the restaurant business. I could use a sharp mind like yours." "I'm intrigued," Blake admitted, swirling his wine. "The cash flow patterns, the supplier networks, the employee management, it's a complex ecosystem." Marcus's eyes sharpened. "Exactly. Most people don't appreciate the intricacies, the creativity required to stay profitable." "Creative accounting?" Blake kept his tone light, professorial. "Let's call it flexible financial strategies." Marcus laughed, but there was warning in it. Nothing that would interest an academic, of course. Of course. Blake smiled, filing away Marcus's nervousness. The man was starting to feel pressure from investors, from law enforcement, from his own arrogance. Camille excused herself for another phone call, and Marcus watched her go with barely concealed irritation. Women, he said, including Blake in masculine conspiracy, can't live with them. Can't create false identities for financial fraud without them? Blake suggested mildly. The table went silent. Sabrina's face drained of color. Marcus's hand tightened on his wine glass. Then Blake laughed. Sorry, economics joke. We've been studying identity theft in my forensic accounting class. Occupational hazard, I see financial crimes everywhere. Marcus's laugh was forced. You had me worried for a second, Professor. I thought you were accusing me of something. Why would I do that? Blake met his eyes directly. We're all friends here. The rest of the dinner proceeded with stilted conversation and suspicious glances. Blake played the oblivious academic, dropping terms like structuring and layering into casual conversation, watching Marcus twitch with each one. Driving home, Sabrina was uncharacteristically quiet. You were different tonight, she finally said. How so? I don't know. More. Assertive. Marcus noticed it too. Maybe I'm tired of being overlooked. Blake navigated the icy streets with careful precision. 24 years of being the stable, predictable one. Maybe it's time for a change. Sabrina's hand found his thigh. I like you exactly as you are. The lie was so transparent, Blake almost laughed. She liked him docile, blind, funding her double life without question. But those days were ending. That night, Blake uploaded the audio files from Oliver to a secure cloud server, then created multiple backups. The recording of Marcus bragging about Blake raising his children would be the centerpiece of the graduation day revelation. But the financial crimes would ensure Marcus had bigger problems than public humiliation. His phone buzzed. A text from Detective Castellanos. Reviewed your preliminary analysis. Exceptional work. We're moving forward with formal investigation. Keep this quiet. Blake deleted the message and looked at Sabrina sleeping beside him. She looked peaceful, unaware that her world was built on foundations Blake was systematically destroying. In 6 months, Ellen would graduate. The extended families would gather. Marcus and Camille would attend as family friends. And Blake would stand at the podium, supposedly to give a father's blessing to his daughter. Instead, he would deliver something else entirely. Truth, served with a side of evidence so damning that no amount of tears or lies could wash it away. The invisible hostage their life together was already dead. Blake was simply choosing the time and place for the funeral. The February meeting with Jacob took place at a small brewery in Leahy, halfway between Blake's university office and Jacob's startup. Blake arrived early, choosing a corner booth with clear sightlines habits learned from weeks of paranoid planning. Jacob appeared 10 minutes late, looking harried. At 24, he carried himself with Marcus's confident swagger but tempered by something else, a uncertainty that Blake recognized as his own influence, years of teaching caution and analysis. Sorry, Dad. Production meeting ran over. Jacob slumped into the booth, signaling for a beer. Thanks for making time. Always have time for you. The words came automatically, truthfully, despite everything. What's troubling you? Jacob waited until his beer arrived, then launched into a story about workplace ethics, a supervisor pushing him to code something that felt wrong, numbers that didn't add up, pressure to look the other way. Blake listened with growing irony. Here was Marcus's biological son, seeking moral guidance from the man he'd been taught to call father. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor. What does your gut tell you? Blake asked. That it's wrong. But everyone says this is how startups work. You bend rules until you can afford to follow them. Everyone's wrong. Blake leaned forward. I've spent 20 years studying what happens when people justify small compromises. They compound like interest, until you wake up one day and realize you've built your entire life on lies. Jacob studied him. That's pretty specific, Dad. Speaking from experience? Blake chose his words carefully. Let's say I've recently learned the cost of willful blindness. Don't make the same mistake. They talked for another hour about integrity, about choosing hard truths over comfortable lies. When they parted, Jacob hugged him tightly. "Thanks, Dad. Mom always says I overthink things, but you get it." "Your mother." Blake paused. "She sees the world differently than we do." Driving back to Salt Lake City, Blake reflected on the conversation. He'd just spent an afternoon providing ethical guidance to Marcus Thorne's son, the same Marcus who laundered money through restaurants and bragged about cuckolding Blake for decades. The irony was almost Shakespearean, but it solidified his resolve. The children, all three of them, deserved better than the legacy their biological parents would leave. Blake might not be their father by blood, but he'd been their father in every way that mattered. His revenge wouldn't destroy them. It would free them. That evening, Blake found Sabrina in an unusual state, nervous, pacing, checking her phone obsessively. "Everything all right?" He poured himself scotch, noting the tremor in her hands. "Fine. Just, Marcus is having some business troubles. Some former employee is spreading rumors, talking to people they shouldn't." "Oliver Reeves?" Blake kept his voice neutral. Sabrina's head snapped up. "How do you know that name?" "Jacob mentioned him. Apparently he applied at Jacob's company, used Marcus as a reference. They called me for a character assessment since I know Marcus socially." The lie flowed smoothly, and Sabrina relaxed fractionally. "What did you tell them?" "That I didn't know enough about the situation to comment." Blake sipped his scotch. "Should I have said something else?" No, that's perfect. Oliver's just a disgruntled ex-employee trying to cause trouble. Marcus had to fire him for stealing." "Stealing what?" "I don't know. Money, probably. Marcus doesn't talk about business problems with me." Another lie. Blake had recordings of Marcus discussing every aspect of his criminal enterprise with Sabrina, including which accounts to use for washing cash. She wasn't just complicit, she was an active participant. Blake's phone rang, Ellen asking if he could pick her up from a friend's house. He agreed, grateful for the excuse to leave. "Blake," Sabrina called as he reached the door. "We're okay, right? You and me?" He turned, studying the woman he'd loved for 2 decades. Even now, knowing everything, part of him wanted to say yes, to pretend the DNA tests were wrong, the affairs were a nightmare, the crimes were fiction. "Why do you ask? You've been different lately, distant, and tonight, asking about Oliver." She wrapped her arms around herself. "I feel like you're pulling away." "Maybe I'm just tired of being taken for granted." The words carried more truth than she could know. 24 years of marriage, Sabrina. When's the last time you asked about my work? My research? When's the last time we did something that wasn't connected to Marcus's restaurants?" She flinched. "That's not fair. I support your career. You tolerate my career." Blake set down his keys, suddenly exhausted. "It pays the bills while you play bartender for pin money and excitement. When was the last time you read one of my papers? Attended a faculty event? Showed any interest in the life I've built beyond being your stable, reliable funding source?" "Blake, where is this coming from?" "From decades of accumulated interest." He picked up his keys again. "I need to get Ellen. We'll talk later." But they wouldn't. Not really. The time for talking had passed years ago when Sabrina first chose Marcus's excitement over Blake's stability. Now there was only the methodical execution of a plan months in the making. Picking up Ellen, Blake found her upset about another fight with her mother, this time about prom. Sabrina wanted her to attend with Marcus's nephew, a nice boy from a good family. Ellen wanted to go with her actual boyfriend, a theater kid Sabrina deemed inappropriate. "She doesn't even know Liam," Ellen fumed. "She just likes that Marcus's nephew drives a BMW and his dad owns car dealerships." Blake navigated the dark streets, choosing his words carefully. "Your mother values different things than you do. That doesn't make either of you wrong, just incompatible." "Did you ever feel that way? Like you and Mom wanted completely different things?" "Every day for 20 years, Blake thought. "Sometimes. But when you love someone, you try to find common ground. What if there isn't any? Then you have to decide what you can live with." Blake pulled into their driveway. "And what you can't." That night, unable to sleep, Blake reviewed the files on his laptop. Financial records meticulously analyzed. Audio recordings cataloged and backed up. DNA results safely stored in multiple locations. the graduation speech he'd been asked to give as a prominent parent, already written with spaces for the revelations that would shatter the facade. 6 months had felt like an eternity when he'd started planning. Now, with only 3 months remaining, it felt too soon. Not because he was having second thoughts, the evidence was too damning, the betrayal too complete, but because once he pulled the trigger, there would be no going back. Blake looked at the sleeping form beside him. Sabrina murmured in her sleep, reaching for him unconsciously. He let her hand find his, feeling the weight of her wedding ring, the one he'd bought with his graduate student stipend, replaced twice over the years with larger stones as his success grew. Had she ever loved him? Or had he always been the consolation prize, the safety net while she waited for Marcus to be available? The questions no longer mattered. What mattered was ensuring that when the truth came out, the children would understand that Blake's love for them was real, regardless of DNA. His phone lit up with a secure message from Detective Castellanos. Grand jury convenes next month. Your analysis was crucial. Indictments coming soon. Blake smiled in the darkness. Marcus thought pressure from Oliver was his biggest problem. He had no idea that Blake had provided law enforcement with a roadmap to every financial crime of the past decade. The graduation revelation would be public humiliation. The federal investigation would be complete destruction. Outside, snow began to fall again, covering the valley in fresh white that would be gray slush by morning. Blake closed his laptop and tried to sleep, counting down the days until spring would bring more than just warm weather. It would bring Judgment Day. March arrived with unseasonable warmth, melting snow into rivers that ran down State Street like tears on concrete cheeks. Blake stood in President Hartley's office at the University of Utah, accepting congratulations he didn't deserve for an honor that felt like cosmic mockery. "We're thrilled you'll be speaking at graduation," President Hartley beamed, pumping Blake's hand. "Ellen's valedictorian status, your distinguished career, it's perfect. The board specifically requested you." "I'm honored." Blake managed appropriate humility while his mind calculated angles. The main ceremony would have over 3,000 attendees. The economics department's smaller ceremony afterward would be more intimate, perfect for maximum impact. Actually, would it be possible to speak at the departmental ceremony instead? More personal for Ellen. Even better, faculty, close friends, family. Much more meaningful. Hartley clapped him on the shoulder. "I'm sure Ellen's thrilled to have her father speak at her graduation." If only he knew, Blake thought, which father would be revealed that day. Leaving the administration building, Blake's phone rang. Jacob, his voice tight with stress. "Dad, I need to talk to you, in person. Can you meet me for lunch?" They met at a taco place near campus, Jacob fidgeting with his food, clearly struggling with something. "I did something stupid," Jacob finally said. "I went to see Mom at work last week. Wanted to surprise her, take her to lunch." Blake's stomach tightened. "And?" "She was in Marcus's office. The door was closed, but the glass, I could see." Jacob's jaw clenched. He was all over her, Dad, and she wasn't stopping him. Blake forced himself to react appropriately: shock, hurt, confusion. "Are you sure what you saw?" "I know what I saw." Jacob's voice cracked. "They were. God, I can't even say it. My mom and that sleazy—" He stopped, running his hands through his hair. "I confronted her. She said Marcus was harassing her, that she was going to quit. But Dad, that's not what it looked like." "What did it look like?" Blake asked quietly. "Like she wanted it. Like they'd done it before. Like—" Jacob met his eyes, pain raw in his expression. "Like she's been lying to us." Blake reached across the table, gripping his son's, not his son's, shoulder. "Whatever's happening between your mother and me, it doesn't change how we feel about you. Any of you." "How can you be so calm?" Jacob demanded. "Your wife is cheating on you with her boss." "Because I suspected." The half-truth came easily. "Your mother and I, we've been growing apart for years. I've seen the signs. And you just accepted it?" "I've been gathering information." Blake chose his words carefully. "Making plans. Protecting you kids from the fallout." Jacob stared at him. "You're planning to divorce her." "I'm planning to reveal the truth. All of it. At the right time, in the right way. Blake signaled for the check. I need you to trust me, Jacob, and I need you to keep this quiet for now. Can you do that? The truth. There's more? More than you can imagine, but not here. Not now. Blake paid, standing. Just remember whatever happens, whatever you learn, I have always loved you as my son. Biology doesn't change that. Jacob frowned at the odd phrasing, but nodded. I trust you, Dad. And, I'm sorry, about Mom. Walking back to campus, Blake reflected on the irony. Jacob Marcus's biological son taking Blake's side against his actual parents. The universe's sense of justice was poetic. That evening, Blake found Sabrina cooking dinner, humming off-key to the radio. She'd been almost manic lately, overly affectionate, constantly reassuring, desperately normal. She knew something was shifting, but couldn't identify the threat. Smells good, Blake commented, pouring wine. Your favorite salmon with that maple glaze you like. She smiled brightly. I thought we should have a nice dinner. Celebrate your graduation speech appointment. You heard about that? Ellen told me. She's so proud. Sabrina's smile faltered slightly, though she seemed surprised when I mentioned Marcus and Camille would be attending. Why would they attend our daughter's graduation? Well, they're practically family. Marcus has been so generous. Marcus is your employer. Blake's voice carried an edge. Nothing more. Sabrina's hand stilled on the serving spoon. Why are you being like this? Marcus has been nothing but kind to our family. Has he? Blake sipped his wine. Tell me, Sabrina, what exactly has Marcus done for our family? He gave me flexible hours when the kids were young. He's offered to help with college tuition. He pays you minimum wage plus tips while you wear cocktail dresses and flirt with customers. Blake set down his glass. He dangles money he knows we don't need because I've provided everything this family requires. So, tell me again, what has Marcus done for us? Sabrina's face flushed. At least he notices me. At least he makes me feel like more than just a professor's wife, some appendage to your career. Is that what you tell yourself? Blake laughed, the sound bitter. That Marcus sees the real you? Tell me, does he notice you before or after he goes home to Camille? The slap came fast, Sabrina's palm connecting with his cheek hard enough to sting. They stood frozen, both shocked by the violence. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't mean... Yes, you did. Blake touched his cheek. And you had every right. We've been living a lie, Sabrina. Both of us. The only difference is, I'm ready to stop. What are you talking about? The graduation speech. Blake moved to the door. I plan to talk about truth, about the cost of deception, about what happens when people build lives on false foundations. Blake, you're scaring me. Good, you should be scared. He paused at the threshold, but not of me. I'm just an economics professor who finally learned to read the real numbers. That night, Blake slept in his study, surrounded by evidence of 24 years of deception. 3 months remained until graduation. The financial crimes investigation was proceeding. The children were beginning to see their mother clearly. The stage was set. All that remained was the performance. Blake pulled out his laptop and began refining his speech. Every word had to be perfect, every revelation precisely timed. He would stand at that podium as a proud father celebrating his daughter's achievement. And then, with the spotlight on him and nowhere for the guilty to run, he would detonate 24 years of lies with the precision of a controlled demolition. The economics of revenge, he had learned, required patience, planning, and the willingness to destroy everything to rebuild something true. And Blake Morrison, economist and architect of justice, was ready to pay that price. The perfect stage awaited. The actors were in position. And in 3 months, the curtain would finally rise on the truth. May arrived in Salt Lake City wearing a dress of cherry blossoms and false promises. The Morrison house hummed with graduation preparations, Ellen's cap and gown hanging in her closet like a ghost of innocence, invitations addressed in Sabrina's perfect script to family and friends who had no idea they'd been invited to a massacre. Blake watched it all from behind his mask of paternal pride, counting down days like a death row inmate who held the keys to his own cell. You're sure Marcus and Camille can make it? Sabrina asked over breakfast, her voice carrying that new tremor that had appeared in recent weeks. She'd lost weight, her clothes hanging loose on a frame consumed by secrets. They confirmed yesterday. Blake sipped his coffee, noting how her hand shook as she buttered toast. Wouldn't miss it for the world, they said. Good. That's good. She abandoned the toast uneaten. Blake, I've been thinking, maybe after graduation we should take that trip, just the two of us. Start fresh. The desperation in her voice might have moved him once. Now it only confirmed what his surveillance had already revealed Marcus was pulling away, the pressure from the investigation making him distance himself from liabilities. Sabrina could sense her world tilting but didn't know which way to jump. Where would we go? Blake asked, genuinely curious what fantasy she'd construct. Anywhere. Europe, maybe? Europe. Remember how we always talked about seeing Paris? Her green eyes searched his face for the man who'd made those plans 20 years ago. We could be young again. We were never young, Sabrina. I was naive, and you were calculating. That's not the same as youth. Her face crumpled. That's not fair. Fair? Blake laughed, the sound sharp as shattered glass. Tell me about fair. Tell me about equity. Tell me about the economics of a marriage where one person invests everything and the other just takes dividends while maintaining a portfolio elsewhere. I don't know what you're talking about. No? Then let me explain it in terms you'll understand. He leaned forward, professor to student. Every marriage is an economic system. Shared resources, mutual investment, compound interest in the form of children and memories. But what happens when one party commits fraud? When the assets aren't what they appear? When the children— Stop! Sabrina's voice cracked. Just stop. Whatever you think you know. I don't think, Sabrina. I analyze, I calculate, I verify. Blake stood, straightening his tie with precise movements. And my analysis is complete. He left her crying at the breakfast table, toast cold and coffee bitter. The sound of her sobs followed him to his car, but pity was a luxury he could no longer afford. The grand jury would convene next week. Marcus's empire would begin its collapse whether Blake acted or not. But that would be private destruction, hidden in courtrooms and plea deals. Blake wanted something more biblical. At the university, he found Ryan waiting outside his office, backpack slung over one shoulder, face drawn with the weight of secrets. Dad, can we talk? They sat across from each other, Blake behind his desk where he'd counseled hundreds of students, Ryan in the chair where futures were discussed and dreams dissected. I've been thinking about the blood type thing, Ryan began, not meeting Blake's eyes. From the hospital, I looked up the genetics and you discovered it's impossible for me to be your biological father. Blake kept his voice gentle, watching his son, not his son, process truth that had taken Blake months to accept. Ryan's head snapped up. You know, I've known for months. And you're still here, still being my dad? The young man's voice broke on the last word. Biology doesn't determine love, Ryan. It never has. Blake came around the desk, placing a hand on Ryan's shoulder. You're my son in every way that matters. That will never change. Does Mom know that you know? Your mother knows many things. Whether she acknowledges them is another matter. Ryan wiped his eyes with his sleeve, suddenly looking far younger than 21. Is that why you've been different? Why she's been so weird lately? There are going to be some changes after Ellen's graduation, Blake said carefully. Things will be revealed that might hurt. But I need you to understand none of it is your fault. You and your siblings are victims of choices made before you were born. Jacob said something about Mom and Marcus. Whatever happens, Blake interrupted, remember that I chose to raise you. Every baseball game, every science fair, every late-night talk about girls and grades and dreams, I chose that. Biology didn't make me your father. Choice did. Ryan broke down then, sobbing like the child Blake had comforted through nightmares and scraped knees. Blake held him, feeling the weight of another man's son in his arms, loving him anyway because love, unlike DNA, could be chosen. After Ryan left promising to act normal until graduation, Blake returned to his preparations. The presentation was loaded on multiple USB drives, backed up to secure servers, ready to deploy at a moment's notice. 60 slides of evidence, each one a nail in the coffin of his former life. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. We need to talk. About Marcus. About everything. C. Camille. Marcus's wife had finally noticed the cracks in her own perfect facade. Blake deleted the message and went back to work. 3 more days until graduation. 3 more days of pretending. 3 more days until the white storm he'd been building would break over Salt Lake City with the force of 24 years of suppressed truth. That evening, he found Ellen in her room trying on her graduation dress. She spun when he knocked, the white fabric flowing like hope around her. "How do I look?" she asked, but her smile faltered at his expression. "Dad? What's wrong?" "You look beautiful," he said truthfully. "Like your mother when she was young." Is that a good thing? Ellen's intuition, sharp as her intellect, caught the undercurrent. Beauty isn't good or bad, sweetheart. It's what we do with it that matters. He sat on her bed, patting the space beside him. "I'm proud of you, Ellen. Valedictorian, full scholarship to Stanford, a bright future ahead. You've earned every bit of it. With your help, all those late nights reviewing my essays, drilling calculus, with your work," Blake corrected. "I just provided the framework. You built something magnificent within it." Ellen leaned against him, and he smelled her shampoo, the same strawberry scent from childhood. "Dad, at graduation, your speech, what are you going to say?" "The truth," he answered. "Just the truth." She pulled back to study his face. Why does that sound like a threat? Because it is, Blake thought. Because truth is the most dangerous weapon in a world built on lies. But he only smiled and kissed her forehead, leaving her to her dress and her dreams that would survive the coming storm. In his study that night, Blake reviewed everything one final time. Financial records, DNA results, photographs, audio recordings, all organized with an economist's precision, ready to be displayed with an educator's clarity. The sound of the garage door announced Sabrina's return from her shift. Blake listened to her footsteps on the stairs, the pause outside his door, the continued journey to their bedroom. They were living as strangers now, ghosts haunting the same house, waiting for an exorcism that would banish one of them forever. His phone lit up with a message from Detective Castellanos. "Grand jury voted to indict. Arrests tomorrow. Thought you should know." Blake smiled in the darkness. The timing was perfect. Marcus would be arrested the day before graduation, ensuring maximum chaos, maximum desperation. Sabrina would be off balance, unprepared for the second blow Blake would deliver. He poured himself a scotch and raised it to the window, where the lights of Salt Lake City twinkled like stars about to be extinguished by the coming dawn. Graduation day dawned crystal clear, the kind of Utah morning that promised perfection while hiding storms behind the mountains. Blake adjusted his tie in the mirror, practicing his expression proud father, distinguished professor, nothing more. The black suit he'd chosen fit like armor, pressed sharp enough to cut. "You look handsome," Sabrina said from the doorway. She wore a blue dress he'd never seen before, probably another gift from her generous employer. Dark circles haunted her eyes despite careful makeup. "Blake, I need to tell you something." "After the ceremony," he cut her off. "Today is Ellen's day." She nodded, relief and dread warring on her face. Did she know about Marcus's arrest yesterday? The news hadn't broken publicly yet, but Sabrina had connections throughout his organization. Her phone had been silent all morning itself, a telling sign. Downstairs, Ellen twirled in her white graduation dress, radiant with accomplishment and anticipation. Jacob and Ryan flanked her, all three laughing at some shared joke. For a moment, Blake saw them as they were not biological siblings, but a family forged by shared experiences and mutual affection. The truth wouldn't change that, he hoped. "Ready for your big speech, Professor?" Jacob asked, something knowing in his eyes. "More than ready." Blake accepted Ellen's nervous hug, breathing in that strawberry shampoo one last time as her legal father. "Shall we?" The University of Utah's Economics Department had reserved the Gardner Hall Auditorium for their ceremony, intimate compared to the main event, but still impressive with its tiered seating and state-of-the-art projection system. Blake had personally tested that system 3 times this week, ensuring everything would work perfectly. As they entered, Blake scanned the crowd. Faculty colleagues, proud families, and there Marcus and Camille Thorne sitting 3 rows from the front. Marcus looked haggard, his usual swagger replaced by something hunted. He'd made bail yesterday evening, just in time to attend. Camille sat rigid beside him, designer sunglasses hiding what Blake suspected were tear-swollen eyes. "Uncle Marcus looks terrible," Ellen whispered. "Is he sick?" "Something like that," Blake murmured, guiding his family to their reserved seats in the front row. The ceremony began with the usual pomp processional music, welcome remarks, the department chair's jokes that landed with polite laughter. Blake sat on the stage with other honored guests, his presentation remote hidden in his pocket like a detonator. Finally, President Hartley approached the podium. "And now, please welcome a distinguished member of our faculty, published author, and proud father of our valedictorian Professor Blake Morrison." The applause felt like thunder as Blake took the podium. He looked out at the sea of faces, colleagues who respected him, students who'd learned from him, friends who thought they knew him. In the third row, Marcus shifted uncomfortably. In the front, Sabrina clutched her program with white knuckles. "Good afternoon," Blake began, his professor voice carrying easily through the space. "Today, we celebrate achievement, success, the culmination of years of hard work and dedication." He clicked the remote, and the first slide appeared a family photo from Ellen's first day of kindergarten. "But I want to talk about something else, about truth, about the hidden variables that shape our lives in ways we don't always see." Click. A slide showing economic formulas. In economics, we call it information asymmetry when one party in a transaction has more or better information than the other. The audience settled in for what they assumed was a typical professor's metaphorical journey. Blake smiled internally. They had no idea. 24 years ago, I thought I understood the transaction of marriage. Mutual investment, shared returns, compound interest in the form of children." Click. Wedding photo, Blake young and hopeful, Sabrina radiant in white. "But I was operating with incomplete information." Sabrina's face had gone pale. In the third row, Marcus started to stand, but Camille grabbed his arm, forcing him down. "You see, in any economic model, fraud invalidates the entire system." Click. The first DNA report appeared on screen. When the assets aren't what they appear to be. When the children you've invested in, click. 3 DNA reports side by side. Carry someone else's genetic portfolio. Gasps rippled through the audience. Someone dropped a program. Ellen's voice cut through the noise. "Dad, what are you doing?" "I'm teaching, sweetheart. The most important lesson of my career." Click. Financial records. About how one party can systematically drain resources while maintaining a separate investment with another partner. Click. Hotel receipts. About the true cost of deception. "Blake, stop." Sabrina was on her feet, but security, pre-warned by Blake about a potential disruption, moved to block the aisles. "But the real lesson," Blake continued, his voice never wavering, "is about choice, because while I couldn't choose my wife's fidelity or my children's DNA." Click. The photo from the park, all 5 of them laughing. "I chose to love them anyway. Every baseball game, every homework session, every bedtime story, those were choices." Click. The audio file icon appeared. "But some people make different choices." Marcus's voice filled the auditorium, drunk and boastful. "You should see him, the professor, playing daddy to my kids. Sabrina says he's planning college funds, worried about their futures. If only he knew he's been paying for my bloodline all these years. Best investment I ever made, letting another man raise my children while I fuck their mother." The auditorium erupted. Camille launched herself at Marcus, screaming. Sabrina collapsed into her chair. Ellen stood frozen, staring at Blake with horror and dawning understanding. "That concludes my presentation," Blake said calmly into the chaos. "Ellen, sweetheart, I'm sorry. You deserved better than this. You all did." Security swarmed as Marcus tried to reach the stage, held back by uniformed officers who'd been waiting for this moment. Federal agents, tipped off by Blake about Marcus's attendance, moved in with practiced efficiency. "Marcus Thorne, you're under arrest for money laundering, tax evasion, and racketeering. You have the right to remain silent." Blake stepped down from the podium, moving toward his children. Ryan reached him first, grabbing him in a fierce hug. Jacob stood protectively near Ellen, who stared at the chaos with tears streaming down her face. "Did you know?" Ellen asked Jacob, her voice barely audible. Some of it, Jacob admitted. Not all of it. Is it true? Are we? She couldn't finish. You're my children, Blake said firmly. In every way that matters, you always have been and always will be. Sabrina appeared before them, mascara running, designer dress wrinkled. How could you? How could you do this to them? How could I? Blake's calm finally cracked. How could you? 24 years, Sabrina. 24 years of lies, of theft, of making me an unwitting accomplice to your deception. I loved you, she screamed. I loved both of you. You loved yourself, Blake corrected, and you loved the thrill. The rest of us were just props in your drama. The auditorium was clearing now, guests fleeing the scandal, graduation ceremony forgotten. Ellen's white dress looked like a shroud as she stood among the wreckage of her special day. I'm sorry, Blake told her again. You deserved a better graduation. But you also deserved the truth. Ellen looked at him for a long moment, then at her mother, then back at Blake. We're still going to dinner, right? The reservation at Ruth's Chris? Blake blinked, surprised. You still want to? You're still my dad, Ellen said simply. That hasn't changed, has it? No, Blake said, his voice thick. That will never change. As they left the auditorium, Blake and his 3 children, family bound by choice rather than blood, Sabrina's sobs echoed behind them. The white storm had broken, washing away 24 years of lies in a matter of minutes. But in its wake, something remained. Something stronger than DNA, more valuable than money, more real than the fiction they'd been living. The private dining room at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse felt like a wake disguised as a celebration. Ellen had insisted on keeping their reservation, clinging to normalcy like a life raft in the tsunami Blake had unleashed. They sat at a table set for 5, Sabrina's empty chair screaming accusations across the white tablecloth. So, Ryan said, cutting into his steak with mechanical precision, Marcus is our biological father, all 3 of us. According to the DNA tests, yes. Blake sipped his wine, watching his children process the atomic bomb of truth. But you raised us, Jacob added, not really a question. Changed our diapers, taught us to ride bikes, helped with homework. Every day for 24 years. Ellen hadn't touched her food. Her graduation dress hung on the coat rack, replaced by jeans and a University of Utah sweatshirt armor against the world's judgment. When did you find out? Last November. Ryan's accident, the blood type incompatibility had started the investigation. Investigation? Ellen laughed bitterly. You make it sound so clinical, so economic. Would you have preferred I handle it emotionally? Blake asked. Storm and rage, break things, make scenes? Maybe. At least that would have been human. I am human, Ellen. I'm just a human who learned his entire life was built on counterfeit currency. I needed time to plan the perfect revenge. Ryan's voice was flat. To maximum impact, maximum humiliation. Blake set down his fork. Is that what you think this was? Revenge? Wasn't it? Jacob challenged. The graduation ceremony, the presentation, making sure Marcus and Mom's families were there. Justice, Blake interrupted. Not revenge. Revenge would have been destroying them quietly, taking everything and disappearing. This was about truth. Truth that destroyed Mom, Ellen said quietly. Your mother destroyed herself the moment she chose deception over honesty. Every year, every lie, every time she looked at you 3 and let you believe, Blake stopped, controlling himself. I'm not the villain here. No, Jacob said after a moment. You're not, but you're not the hero either. They ate in silence after that. The celebration dinner transformed into something else, a family trying to find its shape after being shattered and reformed. Blake's phone buzzed constantly. Messages from colleagues, reporters, friends who'd seen videos already circulating online. He ignored them all. What happens now? Ryan finally asked. With you and Mom? Divorce proceedings start Monday. Given the evidence, it should be straightforward. Straightforward, Ellen echoed, like everything's just numbers on a spreadsheet. The legal aspects are, yes, the emotional aspects. Blake looked at each of them. Those will take time. For all of us. Jacob's phone rang. He glanced at it, face darkening. It's Mom. Third time in 10 minutes. You should talk to her, Blake said. Whatever she's done, she's still your mother. Is she? Jacob's laugh was harsh. She lied about who our father was our entire lives. What kind of mother does that? A complicated one, a flawed one, but one who, in her way, loved you. Don't, Ellen's voice cracked. Don't defend her, not after what you just did to her. I'm not defending her. I'm trying to help you understand that people are complex. Your mother made terrible choices, but she also made school lunches and attended your games and stayed up when you were sick. While fucking another man, Ryan exploded, then looked around the restaurant apologetically. Blake leaned forward. Yes, both things are true. She was a devoted mother and a faithless wife. She loved you and lied to you. People contain multitudes, even people who hurt us. His phone rang. Patricia Chen, his attorney. Blake excused himself to answer. Blake, I've been fielding calls all afternoon. The video's everywhere. Marcus's arrest is trending. Sabrina's been taken to the hospital. What? Is she okay? Panic attack, they think. Her sister's with her. Patricia paused. Blake, this isn't how I would have advised handling things. I know. But it's done. We need to talk strategy. The media attention could work in our favor for the divorce, but the children are my only concern. Blake watched through the window as his 3 kids sat at the table, heads together, united in their confusion and pain. Everything else is just paperwork. When he returned to the table, Ellen was crying quietly while Jacob held her hand. Ryan stared at his plate like it held answers. I need to ask you all something, Blake said. And I need you to be honest. Do you want to continue living with me? Or would you prefer, you're our dad, Ryan interrupted. Biology doesn't change that. You said so yourself. But I just destroyed your mother in public. I planned it for months. What kind of father does that make me? Ellen looked up, eyes red but fierce. The kind who was hurt. The kind who wanted justice. The kind who's human. She wiped her nose with her napkin. I hate what you did. I hate how you did it. But I understand why. I don't, Jacob said. I mean, I understand the anger, the betrayal, but the public humiliation, the timing, you could have handled it privately. Could I? Blake asked. Would anyone have believed me? Would the truth have come out? Would Marcus have faced consequences? He shook his head. Sometimes private justice is no justice at all. They finished dinner in relative quiet, each lost in their own thoughts. As they prepared to leave, Ellen stopped Blake with a hand on his arm. That woman you recorded! Camille! She didn't know either, did she? No, she was as much a victim as I was. So you destroyed her day too, her life too. Ellen's gaze was steady, adult beyond her 18 years. Was she collateral damage? Acceptable losses in your economic model? Blake had no answer for that. Another innocent harmed by truths that had to be told. Another life shattered by his quest for justice. Outside, the May evening was warm, perfect graduation weather mocking the ruins of the day. As they walked to their cars, Blake's phone rang again. Unknown number. Professor Morrison? A woman's voice, refined but shaky. This is Camille Thorne. I think we need to talk. Blake looked at his children who were watching him with mixtures of love, hurt, and confusion. The storm had broken, but the cleanup would take years. Within 48 hours, Blake Morrison became the most famous cuckold in America. The video spread like wildfire through social media, each share adding commentary, judgment, and speculation. Graduation gatecrasher trended globally. News vans lined the street outside Blake's house like vultures waiting for carry-on. His university email overflowed with interview requests, death threats, and marriage proposals from women who found his methodical revenge totally hot. Blake ignored it all from the sanctuary of his home office, watching the internet dissect his life with the detachment of an economist studying market behavior. Public opinion split predictably. Roughly 40% saw him as a hero standing up for betrayed spouses everywhere, 40% condemned him for traumatizing his children, and 20% just enjoyed the spectacle. Dad? Ellen knocked, entering with coffee and exhaustion written across her face. There's someone at the door. Says she's from CNN. Tell her what I told the others. No comment. Actually, Ellen bit her lip. I was thinking maybe we should make a statement. Control the narrative, as you'd say. Blake studied his daughter. 3 days since graduation, and she'd aged years. The Stanford sweatshirt she wore reminded him that she should be preparing for college, not managing a media crisis. What kind of statement? The truth, that we're a family, that we're surviving, that people need to stop camping on our lawn. She set down the coffee with shaking hands. Jacob's boss called. They're reviewing his employment because of the reputational concerns. Ryan can't go to class without being mobbed. And I had to deactivate all my social media, the things people are saying. I'm sorry. The words felt inadequate, but Blake offered them anyway. I knew there would be consequences, but I didn't anticipate that your children would be punished for your choices. Ellen's voice carried Sabrina's edge. That maybe public humiliation has splash damage? Before Blake could respond, his phone rang. Patricia Chen. Blake, we have a problem. Sabrina's hired Gloria Steinfeld. Blake's stomach dropped. Gloria Steinfeld was Utah's most aggressive divorce attorney, known for turning cases into bloodbaths. On what grounds? The evidence, she's not contesting the divorce. She's going for intentional infliction of emotional distress, defamation, public humiliation. She's painting you as an abuser who weaponized your children's graduation for revenge. That's ridiculous. Is it? You did plan this for months. You did choose maximum public exposure. You did record private conversations without consent. Utah is a one-party consent state. For criminal purposes, yes. Civil court is different. Blake, she could take everything. The house, your retirement, future book earnings. Let her. Blake surprised himself with the words, let her have it all. Blake, the money doesn't matter. Only the children matter. He looked at Ellen, who was listening with wide eyes. Set up a meeting. Let's end this. After Patricia hung up, Ellen sat across from him. You'd give her everything? Things can be replaced. Time with you three can't. She lied to us our entire lives. Yes. She cheated on you with Marcus for decades. Yes. She stole our identities, our heritage, our... Yes. Blake reached across the desk, taking her hand. And she's still your mother. Still the woman who sang you lullabies and taught you to tie your shoes. Both things are true. Ellen pulled away. I hate this. I hate that you can be so rational about it. Would you prefer I scream? Rage? What would that accomplish? It would make you human. I am human, Ellen. I'm just a human who learned to compartmentalize to survive. When I discovered the truth about you three, about your mother, I had two choices. Let emotion consume me or channel it into action. I chose action. You chose revenge. I chose truth. They stared at each other across the desk, father and daughter separated by more than furniture. The reporter, Ellen finally said. CNN, maybe we should talk to her together, as a family. Why? Because right now everyone else is telling our story. The internet, the media, mom's lawyers, everyone but us. Ellen stood, suddenly looking older than her 18 years. You taught me that in economics, controlling information is power. Well, maybe it's time we took some power back. That evening, Anderson Cooper's team set up in the Morrison living room. Blake had resisted, but Ellen insisted, and Jacob and Ryan agreed. If they were going to be public figures, they'd at least tell their own story. This is hard for all of you, Cooper began, his silver hair and sympathetic expression perfectly calibrated for the gravity of the situation. Professor Morrison, let's start with why. Why such a public revelation? Blake had rehearsed this answer, but with the cameras rolling and his children beside him, the words felt different. For 24 years, I lived a lie I didn't know existed. When I discovered the truth, I had choices. I could have handled it privately, discreetly, but that would have allowed the lies to continue, just in a different form. But your children are the only innocent parties in this situation, Blake interrupted. They deserve to know the truth about their biological heritage. They deserve to make informed choices about their relationships going forward. Did they deserve to learn it in front of hundreds of people? Blake felt Ellen tense beside him. No, that was a miscalculation. I let my need for justice override my responsibility as a father. For that, I'm deeply sorry. Jacob. Cooper turned to his eldest. How are you processing all this? Jacob straightened, Marcus's confidence showing through despite everything. It's been hell, learning that your entire family history is fiction, that the man you call dad isn't biologically related, that your mom lived a double life. It's not something you process in days. But you're still here, still calling Professor Morrison dad. Because he is my dad, Jacob said firmly. He's the one who taught me to ride a bike, who stayed up helping with science projects, who showed up to every game and performance. DNA doesn't erase 24 years of being a father. Ryan? Ellen? Do you feel the same? Ryan nodded, too emotional to speak. Ellen found her voice. It's complicated. I'm angry at everyone. Dad for the public humiliation. Mom for the lies. Marcus, I can't even think about him. But at the end of the day, this is my family. Broken, messy, built on lies, but still my family. Professor Morrison, what would you say to those who criticize your methods, who say you should have protected your children from this truth? Blake looked directly at the camera, imagining Sabrina watching from wherever she was hiding. I'd say that protection and deception aren't the same thing. I protected my children for 24 years from many things, but I couldn't protect them from the truth forever, and they deserve to know it, however painful. Any regrets? Many. But not about revealing the truth, only about how I did it. Cooper leaned forward. Marcus Thorne was arrested on federal charges the day before graduation. Did you know that would happen? I was aware of the investigation. Did you time your revelation accordingly? Blake felt his children's eyes on him. I provided information to law enforcement about financial irregularities I discovered. The timing of their actions was their decision, but convenient for your purposes. Truth and consequences often arrive together, Mr. Cooper. That's not convenience, that's justice. After the interview, after the cameras were packed and the circus moved on, the four of them sat in the living room, exhausted. Did we do the right thing? Ellen asked. We told our truth, Blake said. That's all we can do. His phone buzzed. A text from Sabrina. I saw the interview. We need to talk. About the children. About everything. Blake showed it to the others. What do you think? Talk to her, Ryan said. We need to start healing sometime. All of us? Blake asked. Or just me? The three exchanged glances. Ellen spoke for them. Start with just you. We're not ready. Not yet. Blake nodded, typing back. Tomorrow, neutral location, just us. As his children dispersed to their rooms, Blake sat alone in the living room where they'd just bared their souls to millions. The public verdict was still being written, but the private one, the only one that mattered, was clear. They were still a family, damaged, complicated, built on shaky foundations, but standing. And in the economics of revenge, that was the only return on investment that mattered. The coffee shop on 9th and 9th was neutral territory halfway between Blake's university office and wherever Sabrina was staying. Blake arrived 15 minutes early, choosing a corner table with clear sightlines to both entrances. Old habits from months of paranoid planning died hard. When Sabrina entered, Blake almost didn't recognize her. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by a simple sundress that reminded him of their early days. Her hair, usually perfectly styled, hung limp around hollow cheeks. She'd aged a decade in 2 weeks. Blake. She sat across from him, hands trembling as she reached for the water glass he'd ordered for her. Thank you for coming. You said we needed to talk about the children. Our children. Her green eyes flashed with something of the old fire. Whatever else has happened, they're still our children. Legally, perhaps. Biologically. Stop. Sabrina's voice cracked. Just stop with the biology and the economics and the analysis. For once in your life, Blake, just feel. Feel? Blake leaned back, studying her. I felt plenty, Sabrina. I felt it when I discovered 24 years of lies. I felt it when I listened to Marcus mock me for raising his children. I felt it when I loved you. The words came out as a whisper. I know you don't believe that, but I did. I do. You have a peculiar way of showing love. Sabrina's laugh was bitter. You think this was easy for me? Living 2 lives, torn between your husband and your lover? Yes, that must have been terribly difficult for you. Between stability and passion, between the life I built And the life I wanted? She met his eyes. You were never supposed to be temporary, Blake. You were supposed to be enough. But I wasn't. No, you weren't. You buried yourself in your work, in your theories and models. You loved your career more than... Don't. Blake's voice turned to steel. Don't you dare blame me for your choices. I may have been imperfect, but I was faithful. I was present. I was blind, Sabrina finished. Willfully, deliberately blind. You want to know the truth, Blake? The whole truth. You saw what you wanted to see. The perfect family, the devoted wife, the successful life. You never looked deeper because you didn't want to know. The accusation hit closer than Blake cared to admit. How many signs had he ignored over the years? How many late nights had he dismissed? How many inconsistencies had he rationalized away? Perhaps, he conceded. But that doesn't excuse. Nothing excuses what I did. Sabrina's tears came freely now. But I need you to understand. Marcus and I, we were young, passionate, stupid. When he came back from France, married to Camille, I thought it was over. Then you came along brilliant, kind, stable. Everything a woman should want. But not what you wanted. I wanted both. She laughed through her tears. I wanted your stability and his excitement, your future and his present. I wanted everything, and I destroyed it all. Blake signaled the waitress for more coffee, using the interruption to compose himself. What do you want now, Sabrina? I want to see my children. Jacob won't answer my calls. Ryan texts single-word responses. Ellen sends me daily updates but won't see me in person. She leaned forward. They're hurting, Blake. The therapy isn't enough. They need their mother. The mother who lied to them their entire lives? The mother who loved them every day of those lives. Sabrina's voice grew stronger. Yes, I lied about their paternity. Yes, I betrayed you. But I never, ever failed them as a mother. Blake considered this. Despite everything, it was true. Sabrina had been a devoted mother-room parent, soccer practice driver, homework helper, midnight comfort provider. Her betrayal of him hadn't extended to maternal neglect. I'll talk to them, he said finally. But it's their choice, Sabrina. I won't force them. That's all I ask. She dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. Gloria says the divorce papers will be ready next week. Patricia mentioned that. Your lawyer is seeking quite aggressive terms. She wants me to destroy you. Sabrina's smile was sad. Take the house, demand alimony, claim emotional damages, paint you as an abuser who traumatized our children for revenge. And I told her no. Sabrina pulled out a document. I'll sign whatever Patricia prepares. The house, the accounts, the investments, you can have it all. I just want reasonable visitation with the children and enough to start over. Blake studied the woman he'd married 24 years ago. Why? Because I've lost everything that matters. My children barely speak to me. My reputation is destroyed. Marcus is facing 20 years in federal prison. Camille has filed her own lawsuit against me. She pushed the paper across the table. Taking your money won't fix any of that. Maybe. Maybe letting you have it will begin to balance the scales. There's no balancing this, Sabrina. The scales are broken. Then let me try to build new ones. She stood, gathering her purse. I'm staying with my sister in Mill Creek. When the children are ready, if they're ever ready, I'll be waiting. Blake watched her leave, seeing echoes of the girl who'd served him whiskey he couldn't afford all those years ago. That girl was gone, replaced by a woman who'd gambled everything on passion and lost it all on a graduation stage. His phone buzzed. Patricia. Just got off the phone with Gloria Steinfeld. Is it true Sabrina's not contesting anything? Blake typed back, It's true. Draw up the papers, standard custody arrangement, modest support. Let's end this cleanly. But there was nothing clean about divorce, Blake knew. Nothing clean about untangling 24 years of shared life, even when that life was built on lies. The legal battle would be simple now, but the psychological war that would rage for years. That evening, Blake gathered his children in the living room. They sat in their usual spots, muscle memory overriding the strange new dynamics of their reconfigured family. I met with your mother today, he began. And... Jacob's voice was carefully neutral. She wants to see you. All of you. She's not contesting the divorce, and she's staying with your Aunt Margaret. Does she think we'll just forgive her? Ryan's anger was still fresh, still sharp. Like nothing happened? I don't think she expects forgiveness, Blake said. Just connection. She's still your mother. Is she? Ellen spoke up from her corner of the couch. I mean, legally, yes. But everything else about our family was a lie. Why should that relationship be any different? Blake chose his words carefully. Because unlike DNA, relationships are built on shared experience. Your mother was present for every moment of your lives. She loved you, imperfectly perhaps, but genuinely. Like you did? Ellen's question cut deep. Like I do, Blake corrected. Present tense, always. The room fell silent, each lost in their own struggles with identity, loyalty, and love. Outside, summer rain began to fall, washing the valley clean, while inside, a family tried to find its new shape in the aftermath of truth. Dr. Sarah Winter's family therapy office occupied the top floor of a converted Victorian in the Avenues district, with views of the entire Salt Lake Valley. Blake thought it fitting trying to gain perspective on their shattered family, while literally looking down on the city where their fiction had played out. Let's start with how everyone's feeling this week, Dr. Winters said, her voice carrying the practiced calm of someone who'd navigated countless family crises. She was younger than Blake had expected, with keen eyes that missed nothing. Angry, Ryan said immediately. I'm angry all the time. At Mom, at Marcus, at Dad for how he handled it, at myself for not seeing it. Tell me more about being angry at yourself, Dr. Winters prompted. I'm studying biology. I should have figured out the blood type thing years ago. All the signs were there. Ryan's hands clenched. I feel stupid. You feel betrayed, Dr. Winters corrected gently. It's not stupidity to trust your parents. Isn't it? Jacob interjected. We're supposed to be smart. Dad raised us to question everything, analyze everything. Except we never analyzed our own family. Blake shifted uncomfortably. He'd insisted on family therapy but hadn't anticipated being under the microscope himself. Blake, you're very quiet, Dr. Winters observed. How do you respond to Jacob's point? He's right, Blake admitted. I taught them critical thinking in every area except the one that mattered most. I failed them there. Did you fail them, or did you trust your wife? Dr. Winters asked. There's a difference between analytical failure and human trust. Ellen laughed bitterly from her corner of the couch. Trust. That's rich. Dad trusted Mom while building a revenge portfolio for 6 months. That's some interesting trust. You're angry at me, Blake said. It wasn't a question. I'm furious at you, Ellen confirmed. You had 6 months to tell us privately. 6 months to prepare us. Instead, you ambushed us at my graduation. My graduation, Dad. The day that was supposed to be about my achievement became about your revenge. Ellen's raising an important point, Dr. Winters said. Blake, can you help us understand why you chose such a public revelation? Blake had rehearsed this answer, but facing his children's pain, the words felt hollow. I believed a public forum would prevent denial, force accountability, ensure the truth couldn't be buried or twisted. You wanted maximum damage, Ryan said flatly. I wanted maximum truth. Same thing in this case, Jacob observed. The truth was the damage. They sat with that for a moment, the weight of it settling like sediment in still water. Let's talk about moving forward, Dr. Winters suggested. You've all chosen to continue living with Blake. Can you each share why? Because he's our dad, Ryan said simply. DNA doesn't change 21 years of history. Because despite everything, he's the stable one, Jacob added. Mom's falling apart. Marcus is going to prison. Dad's the only parent left standing. Ellen was quiet longer. Because I don't know where else to go, but that doesn't mean I've forgiven him. Forgiveness is a process, not an event, Dr. Winters said. What would forgiveness look like to each of you? The question hung in the air like incense, heavy and complex. I don't know if I can forgive Mom, Ryan admitted. Every memory feels tainted now. Every birthday, every Christmas, every I love you, was any of it real? The love was real, Blake said quietly. Whatever else was lies, the love was real. How can you say that? Jacob demanded. She betrayed you, betrayed all of us. Because love and betrayal aren't mutually exclusive, Blake said, surprising himself with the insight. Your mother loved us and lied to us. Both things were true simultaneously. That's very evolved of you, Blake, Dr. Winters noted. When did you come to that understanding? About 5 minutes ago, Blake admitted, earning a surprised laugh from Ellen. See, that's the dad I remember, she said. The one who could admit when he didn't have all the answers. The session continued, excavating pain like archaeologists uncovering artifacts. Each revelation hurt, but also healed incrementally. By the end, they were exhausted but somehow lighter. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Winters pulled Blake aside. They're going to need individual sessions too, especially Ellen. She's carrying more than she's showing. Whatever they need, Blake assured her. In the parking lot, the four of them stood awkwardly by their cars. The family that had arrived together would leave separately Jacob to his apartment, Ryan to campus, Ellen to a friend's house. The diaspora of divorce had already begun. Same time next week? Blake asked. Yeah, Jacob confirmed. And Dad? Maybe ease up on the economic metaphors in therapy. We're not a market failure. We're just broken. Broken but repairable, Blake suggested. Maybe, Ryan said. Ask me in a year. As they scattered to their various destinations, Blake sat in his car watching the valley spread below. Somewhere down there, Sabrina was rebuilding her life. Marcus was preparing for trial. Camille was raising her children alone. The ripples of truth spread outward, touching lives in ways Blake couldn't have calculated. His phone buzzed. A text from Ellen. I don't hate you. Just wanted you to know that. Blake typed back. I know, sweetheart. I love you too. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. And in the economics of emotional recovery, sometimes a beginning was the best return one could hope for. The federal courthouse in downtown Salt Lake City stood like a monument to justice, its Art Deco facade promising impartiality that Blake no longer believed in. He sat in the gallery, watching Marcus Thorne's empire crumble under the weight of testimony and evidence, much of it provided by Blake's meticulous analysis. Marcus looked smaller in his orange jumpsuit, the restaurant mogul's swagger replaced by something hollow. His attorney, a sharp-dressed man from Los Angeles, fought valiantly but futilely against the mountain of financial records. The prosecution calls Sabrina Morrison to the stand. Blake hadn't expected this. Sabrina entered from a side door, wearing a conservative gray suit that made her look like a stranger. She'd lost more weight, her cheekbones sharp enough to cut glass. As she was sworn in, her eyes found Blake in the gallery. Something passed between them, not forgiveness, not anger, just acknowledgement of their mutual destruction. Mrs. Morrison, the prosecutor began, what was your relationship with the defendant? We were involved, romantically, for over 20 years. And during this time, were you aware of Mr. Thorne's business practices? Sabrina's hands twisted in her lap. I knew he was successful. I knew he had multiple restaurants. Did you ever question the source of his success? No, I didn't want to know. Blake watched his soon-to-be ex-wife dissect her life on the stand. Each admission carved away another piece of the woman he'd married, revealing someone he'd never truly known. Mrs. Morrison, did Mr. Thorne ever give you gifts? Yes. Expensive gifts? Yes. Did you know these gifts were purchased with illegally obtained funds? Sabrina's voice dropped to a whisper. I suspected, but I didn't ask. The questioning continued for 2 hours. Sabrina detailed meetings, conversations, financial transactions that painted Marcus as the center of a complex money laundering operation. She was careful to minimize her own involvement, but Blake could read between the lines. She'd known enough to be complicit, not enough to be prosecuted. During a recess, Blake stepped outside for air and found Camille Thorne smoking on the courthouse steps, an incongruous sight for the usually perfect society wife. I didn't know you smoked, Blake said. I didn't, until 2 weeks ago. She took a long drag. Funny what betrayal drives us to. You planned all this, didn't you? The timing, the revelation, making sure Marcus would be destroyed along with everything else. I provided information to law enforcement. What they did with it, don't. Camille's laugh was harsh. At least own your revenge, Professor. You destroyed my life as thoroughly as Sabrina destroyed yours. Your husband destroyed your life. I just revealed it. Same difference. She stubbed out the cigarette. My children ask why Daddy's in jail. What am I supposed to tell them? That he loved another family more than ours? That everything we had was built on crime? Blake had no answer. Camille was collateral damage in his war against deception, another innocent caught in the blast radius. I'm sorry, he offered. No, you're not, but you will be. She stood, brushing ash from her skirt. When the adrenaline fades and you're left with the wreckage, you'll understand what you've really done. You haven't just destroyed Marcus and Sabrina. You've destroyed the idea of family for all our children. That's your real crime, Professor. She walked away, leaving Blake with her words echoing in the Utah heat. Inside, court had reconvened. He returned to watch the rest of Sabrina's testimony, but Camille's accusation colored everything he saw. That evening, Blake found Ryan in the kitchen, laptop open, reading news coverage of the trial. Mom looked terrible, Ryan said without preamble. Testifying against someone you loved can't be easy. Loved? Ryan's voice was sharp. She destroyed our family for him. And now she's destroying him to save herself. Blake poured himself wine. The economics of survival are rarely pretty. There you go again with the economics. Ryan closed his laptop. Dad, can I ask you something? If you could go back, knowing everything, would you have married her? Blake considered the question that had haunted him for months. Yes. Even knowing she'd betray you? Because without that marriage, flawed as it was, you wouldn't exist. Neither would Jacob or Ellen. And you three are the best things in my life regardless of whose DNA you carry. Ryan was quiet for a moment. That's either really beautiful or really fucked up. Both, Blake admitted. Most of life is both. Is that why you're not angry anymore? At the trial, you just looked sad. Blake thought about Camille's words, about Sabrina's hollow eyes on the stand, about Marcus in his orange jumpsuit. I'm angry, but anger is expensive, and I'm running low on emotional capital. More economics. It's how I process the world, son, even when the world stops making sense. Ryan stood, pausing at the doorway. For what it's worth, I'm glad you married her, even if it all went to hell, because you're right, we're the best things to come from it. Alone in the kitchen, Blake opened his laptop to check email. Between the interview requests and legal documents, one message stood out. Blake, I know I have no right to ask, but I need to see the children. The trial is destroying me, but not seeing them is killing me. Please. S. He stared at the message, cursor blinking in the reply field. Somewhere in the city, Marcus sat in a federal holding cell. Camille explained Daddy's absence to confused children. Sabrina waited for a response that might not come. And his own children struggled to build identity from the rubble of revelation. The economics of revenge, Blake realized, involved hidden costs he'd never calculated. The market had corrected, but the recession would last for years. He closed the laptop without responding. Some debts couldn't be paid with words. The for sale sign on the front lawn looked like a tombstone marking the death of their former life. Blake stood in the driveway, watching potential buyers tour the house where he'd raised 3 children who weren't his, with a woman who'd loved another man. Lots of natural light. The realtor's voice drifted through an open window. Original hardwood floors. Perfect for a growing family. Blake turned away. Someone else's perfect family would fill these rooms, create their own memories, their own lies, their own truths. You sure about this? Jacob asked, pulling up in his Tesla. He'd gotten a promotion at the startup crisis, apparently, had matured him into the leader his bosses always suspected he could be. The house is just walls and memories, Blake said. We need a fresh start. Mom called again. Jacob's tone was carefully neutral. She wants to know if we'll have dinner with her before the move. What did you tell her? That I'd ask you and the others. Jacob studied the house where he'd grown up. It's weird, you know? I spent my whole childhood here, but now it feels like it belonged to different people. It did belong to different people, people who believed in a story that wasn't true. But the feelings were true, right? The birthday parties, Christmas mornings, family dinners. Blake thought about all those moments, now viewed through the lens of deception. The feelings were true. The context was false. I'm still figuring out what that means. They went inside to finish packing Blake's study. 20 years of academic papers, economic journals, family photos. Each item required a decision. Keep, donate, destroy. The photos were the hardest. Blake found himself studying each one like evidence, looking for signs he'd missed. This one. Jacob held up a photo from his high school graduation. Look how Marcus is standing. Possessive. Like he owned us. He did own you, genetically speaking? No. Jacob's voice was firm. He donated sperm. You owned us in all the ways that mattered. Look, he pointed to the photo. See how I'm leaning toward you? How we all are? Bodies don't lie, Dad. We knew who our real father was. Blake took the photo, seeing what Jacob saw. Despite everything, the children's body language showed their true alignment. They faced him, touched him, smiled genuinely at him. Sabrina and Marcus stood like beautiful strangers at the edges. Ellen and Ryan arrived to help, and soon the study was stripped bare. Boxes labeled keep and storage filled the hallway. The destroy pile was surprisingly small. Even painful memories, they discovered, had value. I've been thinking, Ellen said, taping a box closed, about forgiveness. The room stilled. Ellen had been the quietest since the revelation, processing her pain internally. Dr. Winters says forgiveness isn't about excusing what happened. It's about releasing the hold it has on us. She looked at Blake. I want to forgive you, Dad, for the public humiliation, for the months of planning while we lived in ignorance, for choosing revenge over protection. Ellen, let me finish. She held up a hand. I want to forgive you because holding on to the anger is exhausting, because you're human and you were hurt, because despite everything, you love us. But I need something from you first. Anything. I need you to forgive Mom. The request hung in the air like smoke. Ryan and Jacob exchanged glances but stayed silent. I don't know if I can, Blake admitted. Try. Because if you can't forgive her, how can we? And if we can't forgive anyone, we'll be trapped in this moment forever. Ellen's eyes filled with tears. I don't want to be trapped anymore. Blake looked at his daughter, not his biological daughter, but his daughter nonetheless, and saw Sabrina's wisdom mixed with his own analytical nature. The best of both of them, refined by truth. I'll try, he promised. That evening, after the packing was done and pizza had been ordered, they sat in the empty living room like campers around an invisible fire. The space echoed with absence, but also possibility. Where will we go? Ryan asked. After the house sells? Blake pulled out his tablet, showing them listings. I found a few options. Smaller, but in good neighborhoods. Close to the university for me, accessible to everyone's work and school. No more big family home, Jacob observed. We're not a big family anymore, Ellen said quietly. We're just us. Just us is enough, Blake said. Just us is everything. His phone buzzed. Another text from Sabrina. Please, just coffee, just to talk about the children. This time, Blake showed it to them. What do you think? She's our mother, Ryan said after a pause. That hasn't changed. Everything's changed, Jacob countered. No, Ellen said firmly. The facts changed. The love, that's still there. Complicated, painful, but there. Blake typed a response. Thursday, 2 p.m., same coffee shop. Just you and me first. We'll see about the children. Thank you, Ellen whispered. As they dispersed to their temporary sleeping arrangements, camping in a house being prepared for strangers, Blake stood in his empty study. Tomorrow, furniture movers would take everything away. Soon, another family would fill these spaces with their own dreams and deceptions. But tonight, in this hollow house, something new was being built. Not a reconstruction of what was lost, but something different. Smaller, perhaps. More honest, certainly. A family based on choice rather than chance, on truth rather than assumption. The economics of rebuilding, Blake thought, required accepting sunk costs and focusing on future value. And the future value of his strange, broken, chosen family was beyond calculation. Outside, summer evening settled over the valley like a blanket. Somewhere, Sabrina waited for Thursday. Marcus counted days in federal custody. Camille rebuilt her life with her biological children, and Blake Morrison, economist and father, prepared to learn the hardest lesson of his life: how to forgive. The red rocks of Arches National Park stood against the September sky like ancient witnesses to human folly. Blake had been driving for 3 hours, leaving Salt Lake City before dawn to reach this place of pilgrimage. 6 months since the graduation catastrophe, 3 months since the divorce was finalized, and he was finally ready to be alone with himself. The Devil's Garden trailhead was empty at this early hour. Blake shouldered his pack, feeling the weight of water and solitude. He'd hiked these trails with the children countless times, pointing out geological formations while they rolled their eyes at his professorial lectures. Now, the silence felt appropriate. The trail wound through sand and slick rock, past twisted junipers that had learned to survive in impossible conditions. Blake thought about resilience, about adaptation, about the economics of survival in harsh environments. Everything still came back to economics for him, perhaps it always would. At Landscape Arch, he stopped to rest. The massive stone span stretched impossibly thin across the sky, defying gravity through pure structural stubbornness. In 1991, a 70-foot section had fallen off, witnessed by tourists who'd captured the collapse on video. Yet the arch remained, changed, but standing. Blake pulled out his journal, a new habit suggested by Dr. Winters. The blank pages had intimidated him at first, but now words flowed like water finding its level. "The children are adjusting," he wrote. "Jacob's startup got acquired. He'll make more money this year than I have in 5. He sends Sabrina money, though he won't see her yet. Ryan switched majors to psychology, says he wants to understand why people lie to themselves. Ellen started at Stanford but calls every night, homesick for a home that no longer exists." A raven landed nearby, studying him with obsidian eyes. Blake shared his trail mix, against park rules but in keeping with the day's theme of breaking old patterns. "Sabrina is working at a garden center in Mill Creek," he continued writing. "She sent a photo last week, dirt under her nails, genuine smile, says she's learning to grow things instead of tending bar. The metaphor is heavy-handed, but I didn't point that out." The raven cawed and flew away, leaving Blake with his thoughts. He'd met Sabrina for coffee every Thursday for 2 months now. Not reconciliation that bridge was ash, but something else. Co-parents learning to navigate shared loss. "Marcus got 15 years, Blake wrote. "Minimum security, but still. Camille divorced him, took the children to her parents in California. Sabrina says he writes her letters she doesn't open. The economics of consequences compound daily." By afternoon, Blake had reached Double O Arch, the trail's terminus. 2 perfect circles in red rock, framing blue sky like eyes looking toward heaven. He sat in the shade, eating lunch and reading the book he'd brought, Mary Oliver's Poetry, a recommendation from the history professor who'd been gently persistent in her interest. "Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" He read the line aloud, his voice small in the vast landscape. What indeed? His life had been neither wild nor precious for decades. It had been structured, analytical, built on false foundations. Now, at 48, he had the chance to rebuild. But into what? His phone, mostly ignored all day, showed several messages. Ellen sending photos from Stanford. Ryan sharing a meme about trust issues. Jacob forwarding a job posting, "They need an economics consultant, Dad. Real money." And one from Sabrina. "The kids agreed to Thanksgiving. My sister's house. Will you come? For them?" Blake stared at the message, then at the ancient arches that had witnessed millions of years of change. Everything eroded. Everything evolved. Nothing stayed the same except the human need to try again. "Yes," he typed back. "For them." The hike back was easier, downhill and familiar. Blake found himself moving faster, eager to return to the world, despite the peace of solitude. At the parking lot, a family was preparing to start the trail, parents checking water supplies, children complaining about the early hour. "Worth it," Blake told them as he passed. "The views are worth every step." The father nodded gratefully while the mother corralled their children. Blake watched them start up the trail, remembering his own family adventures in these parks. Different now, but perhaps not destroyed, just transformed, like the landscape itself. Driving back to Salt Lake City as the sun set, Blake thought about Mary Oliver's question. His one wild and precious life had taken an unexpected turn, but it was still his, still precious in its damaged way. His phone rang through the car speakers. Ellen. Dad? I've been thinking about Thanksgiving. Mom texted about dinner at Aunt Margaret's. I said yes. Is that okay? Yeah, I think so. It'll be weird, but maybe good weird. Like, acknowledging that we're still connected even if everything's different. That's very mature of you. Therapy helps. She paused. Dad, are you okay? You sound different. I spent the day hiking arches. Thinking. About what comes next. About who I am when I'm not defined by betrayal or revenge. Who are you? Blake considered the question as the lights of Salt Lake City appeared in the distance. I'm your father. I'm a professor. I'm a man learning to forgive. Beyond that, I'm still figuring it out. That's okay, Ellen said softly. We're all still figuring it out. After they hung up, Blake drove in comfortable silence. The city looked different somehow, less like a crime scene and more like a place where people simply lived their complicated lives. His apartment, small but sufficient, waited in the avenues. Tomorrow, he'd teach eager undergraduates about market forces and rational choice theory. Thursday, he'd have coffee with Sabrina and discuss the children's needs. And somewhere in between, he'd continue the work of rebuilding not his old life, but something new. Something honest. Something that could withstand the next storm, whenever it came. The economics of recovery, he was learning, required patience with uncertain returns, but the alternative remaining frozen in anger and loss offered no returns at all. November arrived with unusual warmth, the kind of Indian summer that made Salt Lake City glow amber in the late afternoon light. Blake stood outside his office window, watching students cross campus in light jackets instead of winter coats, and thought about climate change as a metaphor for his life, everything shifting from expected patterns. Professor Morrison? Blake turned to find Ryan in his doorway, looking older than his 21 years. The past months had carved maturity into his features, transforming the boy who'd fallen from rocks into a man who'd fallen from illusions. I thought you had biochem lab on Wednesdays. Dropped it. Switched to psychology, remember? Ryan entered, closing the door behind him. I wanted to talk about Thanksgiving. And other things. Blake gestured to the chair across from his desk, the same chair where he'd counseled hundreds of students through academic and personal crises. Now his son, who wasn't his son, sat there, carrying weights that no university course could address. Mom's been texting, Ryan began. Every day. Photos from the garden center, updates about her therapy, apologies that go on for paragraphs. How do you feel about that? Ryan laughed, short and bitter. You sound like Dr. Winters. Occupational hazard of family therapy. We all start sounding like psychologists eventually. I feel confused. Ryan pulled out his phone, showing Blake a photo. Sabrina kneeling in dirt, planting what looked like rose bushes, her face sun-worn but somehow younger than it had been in years. She looks happy. Happier than I remember her being with us. Maybe she is. Doesn't that piss you off? That she destroyed our family and gets to be happy? Blake studied the photo, seeing past the dirt and smiled to the shadows under Sabrina's eyes, the thinness of her frame, the desperate hope in her expression. She's not happy, Ryan. She's surviving. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm sitting, she got away with 24 years of lies. Did she? Blake handed back the phone. She lost her children's trust, her home, her reputation, her financial security. The man she loved is in federal prison. Her former friends avoid her at grocery stores. If that's getting away with it, I'd hate to see punishment. Ryan was quiet for a moment, processing. Jacob thinks we should skip Thanksgiving, just do our own thing. Ellen wants to go, but make it clear we're there for each other, not for her. And you? I think. Ryan stood, pacing to the window. I think I want to hear her side, not excuses, but understanding. Like, how does someone live a double life for so long? What goes through their head every morning when they wake up next to someone they're betraying? Those are psychology major questions. Yeah, well, recent events have given me a personal interest in deception psychology. Ryan turned back. Will you be okay? Being there with her? Blake considered the question. Their Thursday coffee meetings had evolved from tense negotiations about the children to something harder to define. Not friendship, too much damage for that. But a recognition of shared loss, perhaps. I'll manage. The question is whether you three will be okay. Ellen's been writing about it. Did you know? She started a blog anonymous, but it's clearly about us. Children of Deception or something equally dramatic. She's got thousands of followers. This was news to Blake. Is she being careful? With details, privacy? She changed names, locations, but yeah, she's processing publicly. Jacob hates it, says she's monetizing our trauma. Ellen says it's therapeutic, connecting with others who've discovered family secrets. And you? I think we all cope differently. Ryan returned to the chair. Jacob throws himself into work. Ellen writes, I'm studying why people lie. You plan and analyze. And your mother? She gardens, apparently, trying to grow something honest after years of cultivation lies. Ryan's tone was bitter, but not without empathy. The metaphor's a bit obvious. Life often is. They sat in comfortable silence, the afternoon light slanting across Blake's desk. These moments had become precious, unplanned connections with children navigating adulthood without a roadmap. Blake's phone buzzed, the history professor Catherine confirming dinner plans. Ryan noticed his small smile. The professor from history? Ellen mentioned you've been dating. We've had dinner a few times. I wouldn't call it dating. What would you call it? Blake thought about Catherine's laugh, her insightful questions, the way she didn't treat him like either a victim or a villain. Possibility, he said finally. Good for you. Ryan stood to leave. You deserve some possibility after everything. We all do. At the door, Ryan paused. That photo Mom sent? The one with the roses? She's planting them at Aunt Margaret's house. Says she wants something beautiful to be there when we visit, even if we never do. After Ryan left, Blake sat with that image, Sabrina planting roses for children who might never see them bloom. The optimism of it, or perhaps the penance, struck him as profoundly human. We plant gardens in destroyed soil, hoping something might grow despite the salt of our tears. His phone rang. Jacob. Dad, I've been thinking about Thanksgiving. Ryan just left. He mentioned you had reservations. Not reservations. Conditions. Jacob's voice carried his biological father's authority genetics asserting themselves in unexpected ways. If we do this, I need ground rules. No tears, no scenes, no attempts at reconciliation. Just dinner. Civil, contained, conclusion by 8 p.m. You sound like you're negotiating a business deal. Aren't I? Isn't that what divorced families do, negotiate interactions like treaties between warring nations? Blake couldn't argue with the analysis. What else? Ellen can't blog about it. Not immediately, anyway. Mom doesn't need her Thanksgiving dissected for content. Have you talked to Ellen about this? She'll agree. She's more interested in emotional authenticity than click-through rates. Jacob paused. Despite how that sounds, I don't disapprove of her blog. It's helping people. Did you know she's getting emails from kids all over the world who've discovered similar family secrets? I didn't. One girl in Japan found out her father had a whole other family. A boy in Germany discovered his parents were siblings who'd been separated at birth. Compared to some stories, ours is almost quaint. Quaint isn't the word I'd use? No, but perspective helps. Traffic noise filtered through Jacob's end of the call. I'll go to Thanksgiving, Dad, for you and for them, but I'm not ready to forgive her. No one's asking you to. Aren't they? Isn't that what family holidays are about, pretending everything's fine over turkey and forced gratitude? Blake thought about all the Thanksgivings they'd shared, the performance of family harmony masking underlying deceptions. Maybe this year we try something different. Honesty instead of pretense. Acknowledgement instead of avoidance. Radical concept. We're a radical family now. Jacob laughed, surprising them both. Yeah, I guess we are. Okay, Dad. Thanksgiving at Aunt Margaret's. But I'm bringing my own car in case I need to leave. Fair enough? After the call, Blake returned to grading papers, but his mind wandered to Thanksgiving's past. Sabrina in the kitchen, orchestrating complicated dishes while the children helped or hindered according to their ages. Marcus had usually called during dinner prep, ostensibly checking on bar schedules but really inserting himself into their family moment. How had Blake not seen it then, the way Sabrina's voice changed during those calls, the private smile she wore afterward? Blindness or willful ignorance? Even now, he couldn't say. Catherine texted about restaurant options for Saturday. Blake found himself looking forward to it, not just the dinner, but the conversation. She asked real questions, listened to complete answers, shared her own stories of divorce and rebuilding. No judgment, no pity, just two adults navigating the after. As evening fell over campus, Blake packed his briefcase and prepared for the drive home. His apartment waited sparse but peaceful, decorated with carefully chosen pieces that carried no memories. The children had helped him select furniture, turning necessity into bonding experience. Tomorrow, he'd meet Sabrina for their weekly coffee. They'd discuss Thanksgiving logistics, the children's needs, the strange dance of co-parenting without partnership. She'd probably show him more garden photos. He'd probably analyze the economics of her new life. They'd both pretend it wasn't desperately sad. But tonight, Blake had papers to grade, a simple dinner to prepare, and a book to finish. Small pleasures in a life stripped of grand illusions. It was enough. More than enough, really, when he considered the alternative, a life built on beautiful lies versus one built on difficult truths. His phone buzzed one last time. Ellen, sending a draft of her latest blog post, on forgiveness, why Thanksgiving feels different this year. Blake smiled, settling in to read his daughter's words. Outside, the November evening was impossibly warm, as if the weather itself had forgotten the proper order of things, but seasons would correct themselves eventually. They always did. The University of Utah's largest lecture hall was packed beyond capacity, students sitting in aisles and standing against walls. Word had spread about Professor Morrison's special lecture, Information Asymmetry, the Hidden Costs of Deception in Economic and Personal Systems. What they didn't know was that Blake would be teaching from the most expensive classroom of his life, his own destruction. Economics, Blake began, his voice carrying easily through the space, is fundamentally about choice under constraint. We assume rational actors making optimal decisions with available information. But what happens when the information itself is false? He clicked his remote, and a simple graph appeared, supply and demand curves that any freshman would recognize. But the labels were different. Trust on one axis, truth on the other. 25 years ago, I entered into what I believed was a rational economic partnership marriage. I had evaluated the costs and benefits, analyzed compatibility metrics, projected future returns. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter. Blake Morrison never discussed his personal life in lectures. I had, in economic terms, perfect confidence in my data. The problem was, my data was corrupted from the source. Catherine sat in the back row, having asked to attend after their third dinner. She'd wanted to see him in his element, she said. Blake caught her eye briefly, drawing strength from her encouraging nod. Information asymmetry occurs when one party in a transaction has more or better information than the other. In markets, this leads to inefficiency. In relationships. He paused, letting the weight settle. It leads to tragedy. A student raised her hand. Professor, are you talking about insider trading? In a way. What is adultery but insider trading of the heart? One party making secret transactions while the other operates on false prospectuses. The hall was silent now, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. Let me tell you about a man, call him Economist A. He built his life on rational analysis, on careful planning, on the belief that truth would always reveal itself in the numbers. He had a wife, 3 children, a career. The American dream, quantified and optimized. Blake clicked to the next slide, a photo of a house. Not his house, he'd promised the children privacy, but close enough. Economist A discovered through random medical data that his entire family structure was built on fraudulent information. His 3 children were not biologically his. His wife had maintained a 24-year relationship with another man. Every economic decision he'd made, saving for college, buying life insurance, Planning for retirement was based on false assumptions. A student in the front row was crying. Blake wondered what personal story his words had touched. Now, traditional economic theory would suggest economist A should cut his losses. Sunk cost fallacy warns against throwing good money after bad. If the children aren't his biological investment, why continue financial support? If the marriage was fraudulent, why honor any obligations? He let the ugly logic hang in the air before continuing. But here's where economics fails us, because economist A discovered something that no model accounts for. Love is not a commodity. It's not subject to scarcity, depreciation, or substitution effects. The children he'd raised were still his children in every way that mattered. The memories, though contextualized by lies, were still real experiences. Blake clicked to a new slide. The paradox of emotional economics. This brings us to the real lesson. In pure economics, information asymmetry is corrected by revelation. Markets adjust, prices find equilibrium, efficiency is restored. But in human systems, revelation often increases inefficiency. Trust, once broken, creates permanent market failure. A hand shot up. So what's the solution? How do you fix a market that's failed? Blake smiled sadly. You don't fix it. You build a new one, with new rules, new participants, new definitions of value. He spent the next 30 minutes walking through specific economic principles, moral hazard, adverse selection, the prisoner's dilemma showing how each applied to personal relationships. The students took notes frantically, sensing this would never appear in any textbook. The economist in our story made a choice, Blake said as the hour drew to a close. He chose scorched earth revelation, public humiliation, total market transparency achieved through maximum destruction. Was it rational? From a pure information theory perspective, yes. Was it optimal? That depends on how you define utility. He clicked to his final slide, a photo of the Utah desert, red rocks against blue sky. If utility is revenge, then yes, it was optimal. If utility is justice, perhaps. But if utility is human flourishing your own and others, then no. The economist optimized for the wrong variable. He solved for X when he should have solved for Y. The lecture hall was tombsolent. Your reading for next week includes a new paper I'm writing, The False Economy of Revenge, a case study in information revelation. I hope you'll find it instructive. As students filed out, many stopped to shake his hand or offer awkward words of support. The story was public enough that most had connected the dots. Blake accepted their kindness with grace he was still learning to feel. Catherine waited until the hall emptied, then approached the podium where Blake was packing his materials. That was brave, she said simply. That was necessary. If my story can teach them something about the limits of rational choice theory, then maybe it serves a purpose. Is that how you're making sense of it? As a teaching moment? Blake considered the question. I'm trying to transform destruction into construction. Isn't that what humans do? Build new structures from rubble? Spoken like a true economist, always looking for productive use of resources. They walked together toward the faculty parking lot, November sun warming their faces. 3 months of dinners had evolved into something Blake couldn't quite label, not romance exactly, but connection. Catherine had her own divorce story, her own rebuilding. They understood each other's damage without trying to fix it. The children are reading your paper draft, Catherine mentioned. Ellen told me at the coffee shop. She said it's helping them understand your perspective. I didn't write it for them. No, then who? For me, I suppose. Trying to apply academic rigor to personal catastrophe. It's either brilliant or pathological. Can't it be both? They'd reached their cars. Catherine turned to face him fully. Blake, can I ask you something? In your lecture, you said the economist optimized for the wrong variable. What should he have optimized for? Blake thought about his children, about Sabrina planting roses, about Marcus in prison, about all the collateral damage spreading like ripples from his moment of revelation. Grace, he said finally. He should have optimized for grace. For everyone, including himself. And is he learning that? The economist? He's trying. It's not a variable that appears in any equation he knows, but he's trying. Catherine smiled, the expression warm and understanding. Good. Because grace, unlike revenge, compounds positively over time. She drove away, leaving Blake standing in the parking lot, thinking about compound interest of the heart. His phone buzzed Ellen, saying her blog post about the lecture was already going viral. "Dad, you're trending. Economist off revenge. Is that okay?" Blake typed back, "It's fine, sweetheart. Truth in the light is better than lies in the dark, even when the truth is unflattering." He drove home through familiar streets that felt different now, not because they'd changed, but because he had. The economist of revenge was slowly, painfully, becoming something else. An economist of grace, perhaps, or simply a man learning that not everything valuable could be quantified. His apartment waited, sparse and peaceful. Tomorrow would bring more classes, more coffee with Sabrina, more navigation of their strange new family dynamics. But tonight, Blake had papers to grade and a new chapter to write both for his academic work and his life. The economics of recovery, he was learning, required accepting that some debts could never be repaid, some markets would never clear, some equations would never balance. But perhaps that was the most human truth of all. We are not rational actors in efficient markets. We are messy, complex, contradictory beings trying to find value in the wreckage of our choices. The December sun hung low over Arches National Park, painting the red rocks in shades of fire and shadow. Blake stood at the delicate arch viewpoint, the same spot where he'd proposed to Sabrina 25 years ago. He'd returned not for nostalgia, but for closure one last visit before the new year brought new chapters. His phone vibrated. Ellen, sending photos from Stanford's winter formal. She wore a dress the color of sage, her smile genuine in a way it hadn't been for months after the revelation. "Thanks for the advice about the boy's situation," her text read. "Told him the truth about our family drama. He didn't run. Miracle?" "Not a miracle," Blake typed back. "Just someone who understands that broken doesn't mean worthless." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and distant snow. Blake pulled his jacket closer, thinking about all the times he'd stood in this spot with Sabrina, with the children, alone. The arch remained constant, while everything else shifted like sand. "I thought I might find you here." Blake turned to find Sabrina climbing the last few steps to the viewpoint. She looked different, not the desperate thinness of summer, but something healthier. Her hair was shorter, practical, streaked with gray. She no longer bothered to hide. "How did you know?" 25 years of marriage, even built on lies, teaches you someone's patterns." She stood beside him, careful to maintain distance. "Plus, Ellen mentioned you were hiking today. This seemed appropriate." They stood in silence, watching the sun descend toward the maze of canyons below. Other hikers passed, taking photos, oblivious to the weight of history between the two quiet figures at the edge. "The divorce was finalized a year ago today," Sabrina said finally. "I know. The kids seem better. Jacob even answered my call last week. 5 minutes, but still. Progress isn't linear. There will be setbacks." Spoken like an economist. Spoken like a father who's watched his children struggle. Sabrina pulled out her phone, showing him a photo. "The roses bloomed. The ones I planted at Margaret's. Ellen came to see them at Thanksgiving." Blake studied the image, red blooms against white siding, hopeful and somehow heartbreaking. "They're beautiful. Beautiful things can grow from ugly soil." She put the phone away. "I'm seeing someone." The words hung between them like the arch suspended, improbable fact. "Anyone I know?" "No. He owns the garden center. Divorced, 2 kids. He knows my history, hard to avoid it in Salt Lake City. Says everyone deserves a second chapter." Blake felt nothing. Or rather, nothing negative. Perhaps a faint relief that Sabrina was finding her way forward. "Are you happy?" "I'm trying to be. It's different from before. Quieter. More honest." She turned to look at him directly. "I heard about you and the history professor. Catherine? Ellen approves. Ellen approves of anything that moves me forward. She's wise. Gets that from you. She gets it from surviving what we put her through." They lapsed into silence again. The sun touched the horizon, setting the rocks ablaze. Photographers scrambled for the perfect shot, trying to capture what couldn't be held. "I'm sorry," Sabrina said suddenly. Not the desperate, please forgive me sorry from last year. Just sorry for all of it, for choosing passion over stability, for lying every day for 24 years, for making you complicit in my deception, for letting you raise children that weren't yours while knowing the truth. Blake absorbed the words like the rocks absorbed sunlight, taking them in without judgment. I know. Do you forgive me? The question he'd been asked by therapists, children, friends, the question he'd dodged for 18 months. I'm learning to, he said finally. Not for you, for me, for them. Forgiveness isn't absolution, it's just releasing the debt, accepting that it can't be repaid. Very economic of you. Very human of me, actually. Took me long enough to learn the difference. Sabrina smiled sadly. We really did a number on each other, didn't we? We did a number on everyone. Marcus's kids, Camille, the children, ourselves. The blast radius was impressive. Do you regret it? The revelation? Blake had asked himself this question countless times. In the small hours when Ellen called crying from Stanford, when Ryan's therapy bills arrived, when Jacob worked 100-hour weeks to avoid feeling. I regret the method, the public humiliation, the calculated cruelty. I regret optimizing for maximum damage. He paused, choosing words carefully. I don't regret the truth coming out. Living a lie would have been worse eventually. Would it? Sometimes I wonder if ignorance might have been, it wouldn't have lasted. Marcus's crimes would have surfaced. The truth would have emerged. At least this way I controlled the narrative. Controlled the explosion, you mean? Yes. The sun slipped below the horizon, leaving them in the blue hour, that liminal time between day and night when the world looked soft and forgiving. I should go, Sabrina said. Meeting Margaret for dinner. She's been a saint through all this. Family often surprises us with their capacity for grace. Yes. She started to leave, then turned back. Blake, thank you. For meeting me today, for the coffee talks, for not destroying me completely when you could have. I did destroy you, Sabrina. No. You revealed me. There's a difference. Destruction would have been keeping the kids from me forever, pursuing criminal charges, ensuring I had nothing left. You gave me consequences, not annihilation. She left then, picking her way carefully down the darkening trail. Blake remained, watching stars emerge above the arch. His phone buzzed Catherine, confirming their plans for tomorrow. Looking forward to the concert. Haven't been to the symphony in years. Blake smiled, typing back, It's Mahler, Resurrection Symphony. Seemed appropriate. Very subtle, Professor. See you at 7. He began the hike back, headlamp illuminating the path. Other late hikers passed, nodding in the solidarity of those who sought solitude in wild places. Blake's mind wandered to the months ahead, Ellen's spring break visit, Ryan's psychology conference where he'd present on family deception, Jacob's potential move to Austin for work, life moving forward, not in straight lines but in spirals, covering the same ground at different elevations. At the parking area, Blake paused for one last look at the arch, now invisible in darkness but undeniably present. Like truth, he thought. Hidden sometimes, but always there, waiting for the right light to reveal its shape. The drive back to Salt Lake City was peaceful, NPR playing quietly as he navigated familiar curves. His phone, silenced for the hike, showed messages from all 3 children checking in, sharing their days, maintaining the connections that had survived revelation. His apartment welcomed him with its simplicity. No family photos on the walls, they'd all agreed those belonged to a different chapter. Instead, new images. Ellen at Stanford, Ryan presenting research, Jacob at his company's IPO. The future rather than the past. Blake poured wine, opened his laptop, and began writing. Chapter 12. The Economics of Forgiveness. Traditional economic theory struggles with forgiveness because it appears irrational. Forgiving a debt yields no tangible return, but human economics operate on different principles. Forgiveness, properly understood, is not about the debtor but the creditor. It's writing off bad debt to free up emotional capital for productive investment. He wrote until midnight, weaving academic theory with lived experience. Outside, snow began to fall, the first real storm of winter, covering the valley in fresh white. Blake watched from his window, thinking about blank slates and new chapters. His phone chimed. A group text from Ellen to her brothers. "Family Zoom call tomorrow? I have news about summer plans." "Can't wait," from Ryan. "I'll bring coffee," from Jacob. "I'll be there," Blake added. The economics of revenge had taught him about destruction. The economics of forgiveness was teaching him about construction. Building something new from the rubble. Imperfect but honest, smaller but stronger. Blake closed his laptop, turned off the lights, and headed to bed. Tomorrow would bring Mahler with Catherine, family Zoom calls, grading finals, all the ordinary miracles of a life continuing despite everything. In the darkness, snow continued to fall, covering the tracks of the past, preparing the ground for whatever would grow come spring. And Blake Morrison, economist father, survivor, slept peacefully for the first time in 2 years, no longer calculating costs, but simply accepting the invaluable worth of moving forward.